Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Moriarty. Dagan, good to see you today. Happy Friday when we're recording this.
Yo.
How's your life, my friend?
Everything's good. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah, good to see you too. I
just rolled in with my son. They got off from school early. High school, junior high school. They're right next to each other, my kids, the building. So I don't even know what it was. End of semester finals type shit. So I just took Graydon to get something to eat in town. And you know what I saw for the first time? I saw a girl checking him out. And it was weird. I was like it was awkward for me being there, right? She has to see me. She knows I'm the dad, right? A girl about his age, but maybe a little bit older because he's 13 grade, right? And she was kind of like checking him out, but smiling to see, I think, if she could catch his eye to look back, but he wasn't. He was completely oblivious, which was pretty cute. But it was the first time I've seen that kind of interaction with my son. It was like, whoa, it's really interesting. And to see like he's just not in tune with it at all.
Oh, yeah. I've never been checked out. So it's not something that I'd ever know. I do remember I've said it before on one of our shows, Dag, that I have this very specific memory of me and dad at a supermarket. I was in probably early high school. And for some reason, there were like cheerleaders, like local cheerleader, like high school cheerleaders, like bagging groceries for some reason. I don't know if it's like raising money for something or whatever.
Yeah.
But what I remember about it was I really wasn't checking her out. Like I wasn't. But dad said to me when we were walking away, he was like, keep your eyes on your head, Colin, or whatever. And I always remember that. I'm like, well,
called you out.
Yeah, but I'm like, I'm not even really sure what you thought you saw. You know, it's like one of those things you can't fight back.
Right.
Because it's just, and I always remember that as long as I live. Chris Raygun, good to see you, my friend. How are you today?
I'm well. It's early. It's, early in the day for me, Still, I always feel kind of sad that I don't have much to say about the beginning, like every time we start a show, because like for me, when we record, it's like basically the beginning of my day. So nothing's happened yet for me. I don't know what the fuck. The world outside of my apartment literally could be on fire. I have no idea.
It's conceivable that I'm awake even less time than you by the time we do these shows sometimes. Not today, because I did get up a little bit earlier. It's really nice today. I don't know if it's nice by you too, Dig, but it's like in the high 70s here.
It's that warm?
Yeah, which is crazy.
Holy shit. No, it's like maybe 50.
Yeah,
maybe
so
50.
We went for a little jaunt today, just walk around the neighborhood and
70 degrees.
Yeah, it's like really, it's right now it says 74.
Man,
that's insane. That's what you see. That's the Virginia I go in for. It's like, why be in Virginia if you're just going to be in Philly? Also, you need that difference.
Also, Dag, I got today in the mail our cousin Junior's wedding invitation. You're going to this wedding, right?
I am indeed.
All right, cool. So I'll see you there because I don't think the girls are going. Because it's no under 18, so they can't bring their kids.
My kids aren't going. Wife's not going.
So there's be me.
It's a solo mission.
Yeah, me, you, and Mom.
Micah and Mike, Mom and Larry. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be interesting. It's our cousin Junior. Of course, we're Italian, so we have to have a cousin Junior.
Yeah.
And although I don't know. I asked him actually at my wedding, although I don't really remember what he said, where I'm like, did people still call you that? Or like, do people call you John or Johnny? Because his dad
What
is
did
John.
he say to that?
I don't remember.
That's the only reason his name is Junior. Seriously, we kind of sat down and took stock when he was born, and it was like, there's no juniors yet. I guess it's got to go to him. We need one.
That's so messed up.
You want to know what's even strange? This is strange. I love our cousin Allie, but this is even stranger, is that we have a sister named Allie, A-L-I. Right. That's her name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she's named after our grandfather, who was Alessandro, and they used to call him Allie. And she was born in 1979, so that was kind of like the namesake, right? And then our aunt, Joni, who we love very much, she's the one that calls me Chowder Man because I have a huge head. She had a daughter in the late 90s, like maybe 2000, something like that. And she named the daughter Allie, A-L-L-Y, after the dad. And now we have Big Allie and Little Allie in the family, and they're cousins with each other. I'm like, I feel like that's a little much. You know, like
it's not even scratching the surface for me. Like Hispanic families are just, it's all Marias and it's all Jose's. It's like fun. It's amazing how many Jose's are in, like, oh, this is my cousin Jose, my nephew Jose, my uncle Jose, my other cousin Jose. To the point where we're just like, all right, only one of you gets to be Jose. One of you is Joe. One of you is JoJo, probably, because we got to do that.
Right.
And one of you is just Joey or Joseph. That's not Joseph. Your name. Your name isn't Joseph, but we're going to call you that because we need some delineation here.
It gets a little confusing.
Everyone's middle name is Maria. That's even the guys. It's real. It's just how it goes.
The world is your oyster when it comes to names. That's what I don't understand about. I like the whole idea of having the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. That's kind of cool. But you got to get over that junior thing. Like you have to do the first, which is the worst kind of name. And then you get to the third, the fourth. It's pretty cool if you write your name and then you put like a VI after it for six. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool. But
it's a lost art.
See, Micah and I are dead up about the alliteration and the humor. And we really have this idea. I mean, there's a bunch of name ideas if we had a kid, but one of them would be Maurice. So we can have Moriarty, which would just be awesome because he'd probably be either the biggest nerd or the coolest kid in class. Like that's a die roll. When you have a name like Moriarty, that could really work for you. He could be like the next big thing on TV.
Yeah.
He could be the one that's being shoved in his locker. There's almost no in between.
You really gotta, that's a nat 20. Like you gotta roll a good roll for that, for that to succeed.
Yeah, it's really true. I think it'll start with shoving in the locker and then it'll evolve to being older and being famous, being known for your name.
Or the reverse. You might peak in high school and then everybody's like, ew, Maury.
And then giving him like a real, like another alliterative middle name. So like Mondale. So like Maurice Mondale Moriarty. Morimon Moriarty.
Just crossing over the cruelty.
Having a stroke, basically. See, I want to have, our kids are going to be a quarter black. So I want to have a little bit of a black kind of name too. Maurice kind of, but that's why I'm really fond of the name Roosevelt, because I think that that's a pretty strong name for both colors, let's say, both races. Getting uncomfortable. I'm going to say something, and I'm going to say something bad. And
yeah, you got to be careful. Let me say.
Keep going.
What if your kid goes to school? What if you have what if your son has a Wario of his own? Like there's a Moriarty over there.
Oh my God.
In his high school.
Yeah.
I fucking love that.
Anything's possible once we begin the butterfly effect. So
yeah.
Well, my friends, it's good to be here with you today. We're supposed to have a fourth as we usually do, Cog, but no idea where he is. He didn't answer the email yesterday, and he didn't show up to the recording today, which is weird for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope he's okay, because he has like various medical maladies that crop up on him. So who knows? I feel like I haven't even heard from him via text or anything. So we had the show must go on. Mm-hmm. He's been abducted by the aliens.
Off he goes.
They're here. I've been watching that. I said it yesterday briefly, but I've been watching that show Invasion. Oh, damn it. Michael only lets me say that once. Dagan, she hates when I say invasion, like the guy from episode 1. She hates it.
Does she get it?
Yeah, she gets it, but she says I can only say it once a day.
Oh, so you used it up.
Yeah. And I used it last night. So I actually had 2, but I had to say it that way anyway. But
well, hold on. Yeah,
she heard it right. She already said it. You can't hear it through the mic, but that's what she said for sure.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I was about to say it could be like a tree in the forest type situation. You know what I mean?
Nope, unfortunately not. Not. Dang. She's always stalking around listening.
She's got listening devices like she's
a wife
in Splinter Cell.
Yeah, being a wife.
They always know.
So we have 3 topics. We would have had a fourth. Cog didn't even respond to the email, so I didn't even know what his topic would have been, because the funniest thing we could have done was stole his topic. Instead, I think we'll go through our 3 topics, see where we stand, and then Chris actually had 2 topics, so we could even go to that 4th topic if we feel like it.
Yeah.
But we don't have to do it right away. Dag, I want to begin with you because I thought your topic was pretty interesting. I'll be curious to see what you have to say about it. Take it away.
Yeah. This will be a fun one, I think. You guys ready to dish the dirt? You fucking little scamps.
You yentas.
Whoa. Relax.
You want to be a real Long Islander, a real Jewish Long Islander? You call them yentas.
Yentas is the whole thing. That's how this whole thing started. Mm-hmm. And I'll explain. Today I want to talk about gossip with you guys. It's doesn't seem like a very Dagan-esque topic, but eventually I'll tell you why I wanted to cover this. So seems you think of gossip, right? TMZ, the salacious little tabloid, supermarket tabloids you get at the checkout, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the Hollywood drama, whatever. Wanted to see how this applied, the word gossip applied to you guys in your life. Are you down for some gossip, some trash talking? Have you been the source, of gossip? Have you been the subject of gossip?
Have you read the internet?
I have a feeling I know which way you might take this, Colin. But for myself, I never really think of myself. I find myself browbeating the idea of gossip, right? It's like, who cares? The whole paparazzi thing. But maybe you like gossip in the thing you're interested in. Little sports rumors. Maybe you like to follow what's going on in Hollywood. We're very involved with gaming, what's going on behind the scenes. I said in the email, I think about gossip as trash talk, and that will apply to my story, but could really apply to anything. You know what I mean? It's just kind of talking out of earshot, out of range of the person you're talking about. That's how I think about it. This is very recent for me, guys. Like maybe not even 2 months ago, I realized in talking to a person I often talk to, our mom, that I'm the biggest shit talker on the planet. And she is too. It's like me and mom will sit down for the better part of 2 hours and just talk shit on people. And I legitimately enjoy it. Like I'm such a mark for just talking shit, just gossiping. It's always with mom. It's with 3 people in my life. It's with mom primarily, a little bit with Helene. I tend to think with Helene, she's very loyal. She won't talk trash behind somebody's back that she's very close to, but she's still in the workplace. Things go on at work, and it's more with her. It's like venting. So I'm listening to what she's saying about this one or that one. And then with my best friend, we gossip incessantly via text about people we know, people in the skateboarding world that we don't know, whatever. We just me and PJ have this cadence of starting to talk shit and then just end up roasting each other via text. This is almost a daily thing. But it really hit home with me with mom because I was like, you are like the consummate lady on the Brooklyn porch, like the sewing circle, just roasting everybody that walks by. Like just talking, just popping mad smack. And I kind of at first I felt bad about myself. And then I realized, you know what? Mom is a sounding board. Mm-hmm. So if there's somebody I'm frustrated with in my life, right? That's usually it's 1 or 2 people specifically that mom knows, but she has very little personal interaction with. So I could vent, and then mom does the same thing to me, whether she's talking about someone that we know or somebody that I don't know that she works with. That's often the case. So we kind of bounce off each other. We have this thing where we get into hellos, niceties, and then it just jumps right into 2 hours of gossip. I kind of love it. I gotta be honest with you. You don't think about Dagster as a gossiper, but so Chris, I'm going to pass this to you, my friend. That's what makes me think about gossip and just realizing I'm no better than those trash talkers at TMZ.
Yeah, I mean, gossip is such a weird. I don't think I've ever really been a gossiper, but I've been surrounded by that for a very long time, and I think that's just part of like being on the internet in general. Is that you just hear things, and then people have opinions about it. There's obviously like I'm sure there's a lot of gossip about me. I remember specifically. This very strange, like obsessive. Are you guys familiar with Kiwi Farms at all?
Yeah, I know. Dude, I actually only became really aware of it after the Keffels situation.
Oh yeah.
And then I started going to it like to read it. And I'm like, what is this place? This place is crazy. Like, what is this place? I never even really knew anything about it.
It's a really unhinged, like stalking site, basically. It's just a forum where people just, I wouldn't say it's like stalking to the point where they literally track people or anything.
Yeah, it's like they're collecting information about people and turning them into so-called lol cows, basically, where like everything they do is monitored and tracked over these thousands of pages of forum posts. It's crazy.
And then the stories that get extrapolated from those are so just completely out of pocket. I just remember like these stories flowing around about me, like people and eventually sometimes it would like bleed into like my Twitter replies. People would be like, hey, did you XYZ? And I'm like, what? What the fuck is going on? What are you talking about? So like, I've definitely been the subject of gossip. I know I've been around it, but I generally don't like. I really actually don't like to talk shit about people unless I think that it's genuinely like they're in a position of like overwhelming power and authority to the point where I don't really feel that guilty about it. Like a politician, I'll talk shit about a politician every day. Like, quite frankly, like I don't give a shit about that.
Yeah, the rich and powerful.
But, yeah, but I don't know, when you're talking about just like, I don't know, people you know, or like friends, ex-friends, even like colleagues or people who like share share in a career with you in some capacity. Like, I don't know. I've heard gossip about other YouTubers and other YouTube people, and I'm just like, look, man, I don't know. I don't know these people. I didn't see this situation firsthand. I'm not gonna like pile in on this. I have no idea. If something's like in the news and it's amusing, we'll talk about it, like on Star Tank or whatever. But like interpersonally, like I've just never really been much of a shit talker. It even bothers me sometimes when people something I notice a lot is people like kind of bad mouthing their exes, which is like, and it's like, it's not even necessarily like, because sometimes they, you know, sometimes it's warranted, but sometimes it's like, dude, every single person you've ever dated is crazy. Every single one of them. That seems like wildly unlikely. And it just like, it just rubs me the wrong way when that shit happens. Cause then I think like, man, what are people saying about me then?
Right.
You know, like,
yes.
you know, like, so I try to be what I would like to see in humanity in that regard. You know what I mean? Like I try to be like relatively even keeled and separated from that. And look, if I'm going to call somebody I used to date crazy, they're crazy. They're fucking nuts. And I think literally only one person I've ever dated has been sincerely like, oh, okay. Everybody else has been great. Everybody else is cool. You know, still on good terms with all of them, literally. Or, you know, the ones that I would care to keep in contact with even remotely, you know, the other ones are just
that's
gone.
Good.
But like, yeah, I don't know, that just kind of, I've never been a gossiper. I don't know. It's kind of alien to me. I think I'm just too much. I think I'm too in my own head, like personally. Like I'm always like really analyzing everything that I'm doing and the things that I'm thinking. And it's like, is that right to think that? Is it okay that I just thought that thing? I think I'm too busy doing that to give a flying fuck what, like, I don't know, some YouTuber's relationship is. You know what I mean? And in fact, I remember this a lot with Lacey when we were dating and we were like a big public couple. Like people were just like fucking, oh my God. The obsessiveness about it was just like,
that's what I wrote in my notes.
That
was one of the things I was going to ask you about was that particular relationship, just because I found it strange just knowing you both.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. That's got to be pretty tough to be in that public spotlight. I know it was hard for her too, but yeah, it's just so strange. And people's assumptions, like it's very. I know this term's thrown around a lot, and we use it sometimes, but that's like very parasocial, weird, like multiple meta levels down in someone's life that doesn't even know you exist. That to me is. It's a little much, I think. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
like
it's true.
It's to the point where like I probably will never date publicly again. Like if I'm married, if I'm married at that point, it's like, all right, well, you know, whatever. Like we're at the hip at this point. Like now it's fine. But like I'm never gonna like, we're dating for 5 months. You're not gonna be on content or like in a photo on Instagram or something, or like people are probably not gonna know about you at all. Because it's just weird. It's a weird level of it's a weird dynamic there. And Lacey and I are still friends, but like that was just a weird, you know, that was just a weird paradigm and a weird thing to experience for the first time and hopefully only time.
Yeah, like doubles the fishbowl, right? Because you both have a measure of fame. Right. So now you're together. So it just increases people's curiosity. You know, they admire you. They love what you do. And people just want to you both have this. I mean, both people I'm looking at, you know, and that must be hard to deal with.
Oh, Chris is way more famous than me.
Right. But you both have that dynamic where you could relate to being on the receiving end, you know, and it's cool too that you get that and you're not giving it back. Like the way Chris doesn't really go in for drama with the gossip and everything is admirable, because it does make me feel guilty. But I realized in my own life, I'm not gossiping about people that, you know, superstars and whatever I'm interested in, whether it's the animation world or the sports world or YouTube or whatever. It's really more cathartic for me. It's people in my life that are either a problem, at least in my perspective, on an ongoing basis. You know, they have their whole attitude is a problem, or they did something that wronged me or somebody I love. So, and it's usually kind of, I'm thinking about specific people that I really can't handle myself. So my only release is to go to someone like Mom or Helene or my best friend and be like, all right, you know, so-and-so, can you believe this happened? Like that type of thing, where it's like, it's really kind of outside my nature normally. But then I realized, like, you do this on a continual basis. And again, it definitely strikes me with some sort of guilt, but I think that's what it is. It's a therapy, you know, it's a catharsis. It's my way to deal with that one or two or three people in my life that I really can't confront. You know, I can't confront on them. You know, I can't confront these people literally. So my only thing is to go back and be like, you know, have a willing ear to bend. Can you believe what so-and-so did? And then they kind of echo my sentiments because they love me and they want to make me feel better. You know, so it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that bitch. Right. Yeah. I can't believe that bitch. Right. Yeah. She is a bitch, you know, that type of thing. So yeah, but yeah, being on the receiving end is a different thing that I can't relate to.
Yeah. Well,
what do you think? I mean,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure you have a similar sentiment to Chris in that, not so much you with dating publicly, but just your persona and things that have happened and, you know, your following and all that kind of stuff and being on the receiving end. Yeah. Because you're not a gossiper. I've never heard you gossip about anybody.
No, I'm really not a gossiper.
Even when I feel like it was maybe even justified, you never really went in for that.
No, there's a few things. Like the first thing is that I think gossiping is okay in private conversations, is not necessarily out of malice, but it's hard to know how to even put this into words. It's like, I think it's okay to say certain things in certain company that's not meant to leave that company. And I could ruin a whole bunch of people by out of context outing things they've said to me or around me in that kind of company. And I think that judging people based on that is kind of shitty. Like a person will say an inappropriate joke or say an inappropriate word and laugh about it or say some shit about someone or whatever, but it's all about the context. And I think that that's somewhat important. I think that there's even a, I don't know if it's gossip. I'm trying to remember. There was like a Nova episode about, it was like something like that, like some evolutionary thing about obviously communication, but then vetting things and stories and mysticism and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting. But yeah, I try to keep in mind, first of all, I was never like a very popular person anywhere I was. And like as a kid, as an adult. And I can only imagine what people say about me. And often I don't have to imagine it because I can read it. And I often do. And the one thing is I don't listen or watch videos about me. There's so many videos and podcasts about, like, I don't do that stuff. But if it's like,
that's gotta be weird though.
But if it's like reading, like dissecting things I say and stuff, and that's like, I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't need to listen to that. But if it's easy enough to like read a comment, I'll read it if I come across it. And I just think gossip has a place, but I just try to kind of, it's not even like a do unto others kind of thing. I just, it's almost about keeping your powder dry, like amongst mixed company. In other words, there are certain people in my life, very specific people in my life, where I'll say almost anything about anyone because I know it's not going to leave the, like, you can be mad at someone or someone you love or say something and that it's going to not be taken out of context and it's going to be understood in the context it's delivered. And it's important to get that shit out. I think it's like I've used this context before, but like writing a letter and throwing it away or burning it or whatever. I've written so many things I've never shown anyone, not like fiction or anything, but just like, I'm going to fucking write this letter and then I'm just going to delete it. You know? Yeah. And it really does work. And so I don't know. I just, the one thing I think is just people lack self-awareness. And so I quickly become tuned into what people say about other people. And then I kind of cut them out because in a meaningful way, because I'm like, well, obviously you talk shit about me. I mean, there's just no way. That's the thing. It's like almost it's a mental block where you have to kind of understand that you are the subject sometimes, like totally.
Yeah.
And
100%.
if you want to put that energy into the world, that's fine. And sometimes that's necessary. But generally speaking, as you said, Dagan, it's like, that's not really my thing. And I am kind of, not to, like we come from a very matriarchal, what I would consider a yappy family.
Yes.
And everyone has something to say about everything and everybody all of the time.
Yes.
And I find it annoying, kind of shallow, and I don't participate. And it's probably one of the reasons why I always bust balls where I'm like, can we ever say anything real? Like at these family functions, like can we have a real conversation about anything, as opposed to scuttlebutt and fucking small talk at all times. And I consider that kind of this as well. But the one thing I'll say is that it's interesting watching gossip become the narrative and like the truth. And it's funny watching over time people create things like, just from my own self-aware point of view, like who I am or what I am. And I'm not even talking about obvious things. Like one interesting thing, this is just something I think about, is there's like this theory that I listen to Timcast, the Tim Pool podcast. I see this written about me all of the time. Now, Tim Pool's a friend of mine. I like Tim Pool, but I actually never listen to Timcast. Like I might listen to it once every 6 months or something. If there's like someone on there, I'm like, oh, that's strange. But like when I go around over the years and read, it's like, oh, Colin loves Timcast. Of course he said that or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't know where that came from. That's just gossip and rumor and innuendo that has become the truth, very similar to other more obvious things that people say about me that become the truth over gossip. And I try to keep that in mind. And I'm also very skeptical of the things other people say about me. I don't want to, there's so many different situations that happen, for instance, at and around IGN in the games industry where I'm like, where there's this narrative about a person or this thing happened or whatever. I'm like, I don't believe you. I'm not going to, and I know that that's the narrative. I don't think you're telling the truth about it, but I'm not going to get involved in like the behind the scenes scuttlebutt about it. That's just my own personal opinion. But I think that people use that power, that narrative power that would begin as gossip or what I would call like the whisper network kind of shit that can begin to ruin people. Remember, there was remember that document, Chris, you probably remember this. There was like I think it was within like proper journalism, like institutional journalism. There was like a document that went around with dudes' names on it with like all of the allegations against them that were just from this whisper network. And as I recall, people got sued over that. I'm pretty sure, Chris Avallone, who I've been talking to behind the scenes, who was a famous games writer, was falsely accused of things in whisper networks to the degree where he sued and won, which is very rare in the United States because we have very loose libel and slander laws in the United States. It's not like the UK where people get sued all the time over there. Like there's a great breadth of what you can say. Like, I think saying like, I think you're a sexual assaulter or whatever. Like, I'm not sure that that's necessarily, whoever you're saying that about, like, I'm not sure that that's necessarily illegal, in the United States. Like you have to go far and above and beyond that to prove malice and harm. So that kind of, I don't know if that all makes sense, but that kind of goes into the whole gossip thing where I'm just very skeptical of what everyone says about everything. I assume people are lying. There are things where I read them about whatever. And I'm like, that didn't happen. That's not true. Like things I read about people I knew or whatever, I'm like, that doesn't sound like anything they would have ever said or done. And a lot of that just gets bubbled up. And so I just try not to participate too much in that. I also just don't have a very big circle anymore. Like after what happened at Kind of Funny, I just narrowed my circle to a drastic minimum where I'm not even almost talking to anyone anyway. So you can count on probably two hands the number of people I actually have conversations with at any time at this point in my life. So that's a lot, Dag. But yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I think gossip has like a place, but yeah, it's not something I really try to participate in just because I'm, again, not to be like too self-aware, but I've always been self-aware of it. Like even as a kid. And I told the story once, Dag, when we were talking about heartbreak or something, I think on Knockback or something, where I was like really into this girl in high school. I was like 16. She had a little sister that was also, she was like in my grade, her little sister was like a year below, I think, or something like that. And I had kind of been flirtatious with her sister. And then that was like a while back or whatever, when we were in like 10th grade or 11th grade or whatever. And then I was in this chemistry class and she was my lab partner, the older sister. And we became like, we had this like fun flirtatious thing. And she was like one of the popular girls. And I remember telling you about this, Day, like it was like the craziest situation because I was like, oh my God, like one of the popular girls likes me. And she would call me on the phone and like we would hang out and all of this kind of stuff. And then this rumor began that I was still into her little sister or flirted with her little sister or whatever, which is not true. And that was the thing. And that's what I was remarking on the show when we were talking about it at the time. I was like, the bummer about that gossip and that rumor was that it was decidedly not true. And that was my first example of heartbreak because I was like really, really into this chick. And, you know, obviously I didn't know anything about anything at that point, but I always think about that. And so I was victimized by a rumor at that point. And that's probably not the only time. I mean, when you think about, again, the Timcast thing is just such an interesting example, but that's what I always think about when it's like Colin's a fucking neo-Nazi and he listens to it. I'm like, dude, I don't listen to any of that. I don't even know where you got this from.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm a friend, I'm friendly or I'm friends with someone means I like watch all their content or agree with them. Strange times. But I also think you just can't control it. And I've come to realize that as well. Like,
well, that's definitely true.
The more you spin your wheels, I mean, it's just going to get worse. You know, so.
Yeah. Right, exactly. That's the other thing. You're just calling more attention to it and making it more pronounced.
Right, exactly.
At a certain point.
Exactly.
And yeah, that age, high school is a really sensitive age because that you're so concerned with your reputation. And then rumor or gossip as sabotage, it's like a nightmare at that age, especially like you're saying, if it's untrue.
It was not true. I mean, I will never forget that. I'm like, what the? I was so sad because I was so close to having like a girlfriend that was, you know, like that was like mega popular.
But who do you suspect threw you under the bus?
I don't know.
In that case,
I don't know. And she was straight up like, she wouldn't, to her credit, like, would not talk to me. And we talked after college. She went to college, I went to college, and then we talked a little bit after college, not in any romantic way, but just like, and I remember saying that, I'm like, I just want you to know that didn't happen. Like, just so like to correct the history in your own head. Like, I accept that that's how it went down, but it wasn't true. Just so
what
you
did
know.
they say to that?
And she was like, oh, it's, you know, a long time ago kind of thing or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm just correcting the record. As an historian, I feel like that's an important thing.
Yeah, let's get this on the record. As
a historian, I love that.
I remember where I was in my house in Daly City when I lived in the so-called gay house, and I was in the kitchen, and I remember talking to her on the phone. Like, it was 2007.
I love that. You gotta just straighten it out.
Yeah, I was just like, that was probably the last time we ever spoke. She's married and has kids and all this kind of stuff now. But but it really bummed me out. Funny. It really, really, dude. I was crestfallen, dude. Yeah, it was the first example of that in my life. Yeah,
dude.
That's hard.
I was not really hard. I don't know. Maybe I was. I don't remember being aware that I was the subject of any rumor or conversation. I think I very much blended in. Like, I wasn't very. The archetypes that I see in high school movies, I don't understand them because like they just didn't exist in our, like there was no popular.
Really?
There was no like there were people who were popular, but they didn't get any esteem from that. From anybody else. It was just it's just like a lot of people knew them because they were like, I don't know, in the school paper or something, or they were like the obvious valedictorian, or they were, there was some reason for them to be well known, but nobody really, I don't know, like we existed so separate from that. There was never a cool table, a jock table. Everybody kind of interacted. I remember playing Risk.
That's cool.
I remember like playing Risk at like football players' houses and stuff, like, and just playing Smash Brothers at like with like theater kids, and it was just such a nebulous mixing pot, like where I went to school and where I grew up, that like I don't think that kind of thing ever really
so different
happened, and so when I think about rumors, especially at that age, or gossip, I don't remember being the subject of anything because we were just kind of weird. We were just weirdos. But it wasn't even like a bad thing. Like people liked us. like I feel like that's kind of the thing where it's like in a movie, like if you could cast my group of friends in a movie, they would be the outcast people that were like made fun of, but we weren't. we were just like, oh yeah, that's them. And then like people would hang out with us. Sometimes there'd be a football player there. Sometimes there would be like some other person there. Sometimes like the valedictorian would pop by and like joke around for a little bit and then leave. It was weird. But I don't remember any stories. I kind of wish I don't know. I kind of wish maybe there were, and I just was so.
Yeah, you're just not privy.
Oblivious.
I mean, people were definitely saying something about you. I think it's important that you don't know. It's like that's what I was saying earlier about the mental block of acceptance. That this is happening, that things that you should never, and that's what I was saying earlier about like mixed company, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There are things that are said that should never be heard by anyone outside of that company. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be said. It means that it needs to be interpreted within the context of what it's said and who, like, Can I give you an example real quick? I think I've told you guys this before in some context. I had a really good friend, Abby, in college. And she lived in an apartment. Her dad owned the apartment, actually. So we all lived in dorms, but she lived in the same place all 4 years. And we used to congregate there all the time. Me and all of our friends. Ramon was part of the cadre of people. We would just go there.
Yeah.
And she had roommates. And it was just a very open environment. So this was during the AIM era, right? So I aimed Abby something like about her roommate. And we didn't like her roommate. Like one of the roommates. We didn't like her at all. And she was like this really heavy chick. No offense. It's like whatever. But I said something about how she was fat in the AIM, right?
Yeah.
It was for Abby and her eyes. I can't believe I forgot to bring this up because this is a perfect example, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I come over. This girl had went into Abby's room for something.
No.
Went on her laptop that was on the desk as she was going through it, saw my AIM and read it. And our whole thing was like, you shouldn't have, that wasn't for you.
Holy shit.
Like, and it was like it caused like a big schism with some people, not anyone I really cared about, but it's like, we would never, I'm sorry I said that in some sense, and I'm sorry you saw it, but you weren't supposed to see it. There was no universe where I was saying that.
Right.
And that's gotta be okay. Otherwise, people can't say anything about anyone at any time. Like if you get mad about something I say in an AIM message, I get that. You can't undo that. You can't take that back or unsee it. But you have to understand that you weren't supposed to see it.
Right.
And that should matter. It's the same thing about people say. If you say a really inappropriate joke or word in certain contexts to make people laugh or as part of a joke or whatever, and then you just take that, snip it out, and then say like, oh, you're in a workplace? Here you go. And it's like, yeah, but that's not what the context was.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's important. Anyway, so I wanted to say that, Chris, you were saying something, though. I don't know if you remember what you were going to say.
Oh, I don't.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to get that out of me before I forgot, because I can't believe that didn't come up.
It's the whole Sopranos, Ginny's got a 90-pound mole on her ass.
Right.
It's that whole thing of like, it wasn't intended to get back to, to the husband.
That has to be part of it. It doesn't mean that it's right, but it is kind of shitty. Like, everyone dodges like Neo, the fucking bullets, right? All of the different things that you say and do, there are no consequences because it's all within the realm of society. Everyone understands the context and all of the rest. And then one stray goes off and hits someone and they become like the worst person in the world, but you've all done it.
That's why that's why you got to be careful. That's the thing though. It's like, we are in a different era now. Like this isn't like, it's not like you're in a village, and like what you say is going to extend to like, what's the, like maybe like a mile, like now it's like, if you say something to someone about someone else and it's like meant to stay in, there's no way it's staying in. People are blabbermouths. People like I'm in a weird position too, because like I straight up do not reveal any information about anybody. Like I do not let anything slip. I'm a vault, man. And I have that reputation now. And so people will often come to me to just kind of vent. And I don't mind that. I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. It gives me a lot of like perspective and a lot of interesting context. It's like, oh, I'm kind of, I almost feel like not omniscient, but I feel like I have insight into people's, into more people's thoughts than most people do, like in my circle, because I have that reputation of just being like a tight-lipped person who doesn't just, I don't gossip.
That's
and so
awesome. Yeah,
it's interesting, but like, I know that like, if I said anything, I don't really care about that reputation really, by the way. It's just something that I have because I just don't care to engage with any behavior that would ruin it. It's not even like I'm trying to maintain it or anything, but I do know if I said anything to anybody, like that's going to end up in fucking Alaska at some point.
Yeah. True.
It's just with the nature of the internet and just how we can communicate from like fucking wherever we are. It's a different place now. And so like, I don't know. I even when I do say things, or if I ever talk shit about anybody, I usually will not care that they hear it. You know what I mean? That's kind of my thing. It's like if I'm okay with them hearing it, then I won't mind saying it to like a group of people. And sometimes it's really fucking hurtful. But like I'll say it. Like I've told stories on like podcasts, and sometimes people are like, "Hey man, what the fuck?" Like, yeah, I mean, well, why'd you do that then? Like I'm not gonna. I didn't mention you by name. It's
Right.
weird. Like I told a story like completely anonymously about like this freak that went to our high school, and like they found it, and they were like, "Yo, why you
Holy
talking smack?" And I'm like, "Why? What do you mean?" It's weird. First of all, it's weird that you're listening.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, it's weird that you came to me to complain about this, where your identity is completely protected. Third of all, I didn't do what you did. So don't like how you cannot do that. I'm not going to say it again because it's like whatever.
Yeah.
But like you cannot do what you did and expect people who knew that not to talk about it.
Yeah, right.
You know, I did you a fucking kindness. You know, I'm not trying to ruin your life or anything, but I don't know. It's bizarre. It's bizarre because the only people who would have gleaned that was you are people who knew already. You know, so I don't know. I find a lot of that. I don't know. Sometimes I find the sensitivity around that stuff a little bit annoying as well, where it's like, come on.
Definitely. 100%.
But
that's happened to me too, actually, where somebody confronts me on something they heard. And it's like, and you know what the other interesting thing is that person had to consider whether they were going to out themselves, you know, as a listener as well.
Yeah.
You know, that, and that they were that, the stakes were that high that they had to come to me in a confrontational way. I like Chris's sort of policy on thoughtfulness and intentionally saying things that he knows isn't a slip. Like he doesn't mind, not only as somebody telling a story, but as a sounding board for your friends. Yeah. Kind of a therapist too.
Kind of.
As being
it's largely selfish, so I don't have to think about my own shit, honestly. Like, I do think I get some degree of satisfaction knowing that like I'm not suffering in silence or like just like in this void alone. Like everybody's dealing with these like really complicated like interpersonal
100%,
fucking
dude.
anthill kind of tunnel things where they're kind of like trying to navigate and everybody's stressed out. It's kind of nice for me. So there is like a selfishness involved there.
Totally. I get that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Everybody's going through a type of thing. It's
right.
You know, it makes me feel really bad though, because I'm thinking about my 3 sounding boards and it's so cowardly on my part to be gossiping with them because I know they're the 3 people that aren't talking shit behind my back. Like there are plenty of people popping smack behind the Digsters back, but it's not those 3. Yeah. So
it's all me.
You know what I mean?
Don't call yourself the Dagster. Can you not do that? The fuck was that?
I don't know. I just slipped that in. It didn't get by, so you flagged it. All right.
Fair enough. You really tried to slip it by there.
It took me a minute, but it didn't get by the goalie.
Fair enough. It did get by the goal.
Colin was buffering.
Yeah, it's
yeah, I know. I was confused. 56K. Yeah, Dig, it's interesting because who's confronted you about the things you said?
Well, no one. See, the thing is, like, it's more of an introspective thing with me finally realizing, like, dude, you like gossip just as much as the next person. You know what it was? I'll tell you what the dynamic, one of the dynamics in my life that brought it to my attention was, and I hate to say this, and I'm not saying it in a bad way, I'm almost saying it in a prideful way. It's what you were describing about our family before, Kyle, and I think Chris could relate to this too, is a very New Yorker dynamic. You know, there's something about, I'm not saying all New Yorkers are loudmouths, but there's something about that whole thing that everybody knows about New York. It's very candid, no suffering of fools, talking shit, you know, calling it like you see it.
Yeah, I've realized that as I've gotten older, that is how I am. And that's why a lot of people don't like me.
Yeah, no holding back.
But it is. I don't think about it. It's not. It's just who I am. You know.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I don't think about it. I don't think twice about it. Yeah.
But it's funny because it's not like that in Philadelphia. Not from my experience. So I have my New York side of the family, and then my Philadelphia side of the family, which is Helene, and it's not like that here. You know what I mean? Like it's only 100 miles away, but it's a very different. It's a whole different look. So I think it was hard for Helene at first. I mean, we've been together almost 30 years. But I think the first probably decade of that was hard for her because she would see that and then know full well when she was outside of range that she would sometimes be the target of that, you know, being talked about behind her back. And I think that's hard on a person when they're not used to that. You know, Helene's family is much more, polite. I'm sure a lot of things bother them, but they're not sitting around the table talking about this one and that one, you know. And in a lot of ways, I think it's healthy the way our family does it, because it's getting shit off your chest.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not, you don't have anything bottled up. We're not keeping it contained. But I think that's hard for an outsider to come in, and then, you know, she still marvels at that type of thing. Exactly what you said. Like, I can't believe like the amount of, I don't know, even know how she refers to it, you know, as just like shit talking to the point of, I have to tell her it's not even as angry as it sounds. You know what I mean? Like, this will be forgotten about tomorrow type of thing. It's just, it's almost a form of entertainment. It's almost a form of storytelling, you know, and I'm just as culpable to get into that. And then I feel like, you know what, that's just where you came from. You know, it's how you were raised and what you saw, even as a kid, you know, and I think that's just the world I know. And I think that's the thing too. It's entertaining. You know what I mean? It's entertaining to hear somebody's frustration, somebody's stories. Can you believe what this one did? This is an outrageous thing. Can you even relate to that? You know, look what a terrible parent this one is. It's terrible on one end, but I think that's the thing. I think New Yorkers are just great storytellers, and we entertain the shit out of each other.
That very much like extends in some way to like just how I've noticed that the way that I analyze my relationships with like friends and people that I care about or anything like that is so different because of like where I was before, or because of where I grew up. Like, there are people that like I talk to pretty regularly that I wouldn't consider them friends. You know what I mean? And people are like, well, you're friends with this person or whatever. And it's like, no, I'm friendly. I'm friendly with these people. I'm not friends with these people. I don't talk about like serious things with these people. I don't like have like actual conversations about like, oh man, I don't know what to do. Like those are my friends. And sometimes people are like really taken aback by that, where I'll like talk on stream where I'm like, are you, hey, I heard you're friends with this person. I'm like, no, I'm not. and then they're really baffled by it, or then it'll get back to that person. They'll be like, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I like you. You're cool. It's not a matter of like, I just don't consider a friend to be somebody that like I'm just friendly with. I'm friendly with complete strangers.
That's well said.
If I bump into like a complete stranger and I say sorry, I'm being friendly with that person. It doesn't mean I'm their friend. You know, like, I don't know anything about them. I don't know them on a day-to-day basis. I haven't lived with them. You know, I haven't, you know, there are different levels to that. And so sometimes I'll talk about people that like, or I'll have stories about people that I used to do like content with or something back in the day. And people are like, wow, you really threw your friend under the bus there. And it's like, bro, we made a video together. I don't know. I just noticed that there's like a very strange divide there with like how people even, and it makes me wonder, like, who are people fucking considering their friends at this point?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are lonelier
than ever, right? Right now.
So they say.
Yeah. But at the same time, the standards for who people keep as friends are so low. It's weird. It's confusing.
So it's even darker than it seems, if that's true. You know?
Yeah, it's weird. It's very bizarre. I don't know. I know that's kind of tangential, but like, I don't know.
Well, that's what the show's all about, my friend. I mean, it's unfortunate that Dagan's such a huge racist. You're ashamed that started getting around the internet.
Are you starting some gossip?
There he goes.
Juicy gossip.
Dagan, you say shit?
Yeah, man. Thank you for being a sounding board. You guys are going to be in my sewing circle now.
Oh, good. The Dag Master General over here sewing Discord.
All right. Sewing circle. I like that. Be caught up in the sewing circle with them hoes. I think that was, I think that's currency.
Is that currency?
I'd rather be a straight G rolling up a whole OZ of that OG, have him KO'd, I believe is the next line, by the way.
Wow.
All right. God, I love me some hip hop. Can't you tell? Just look at me.
Of course.
All right. Let's see. We have two more topics.
With your Incubus shirt.
It's one of my custom made shirts. By the way, Dag, I got a bunch of new custom made ones in, and so one of them I wore in the Sacred Symbols yesterday. I don't know if you saw it yet. Is my new Enix shirt. Maybe the only Enix shirt in the whole world. All right,
that might be.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let us not forget Enix. All right, let's see. I'm looking at the things here. I guess I'm going to go next because then we can finish with Chris. Either do one or two, both of Chris's, depending on how we feel.
Yeah,
I wanted to talk to you guys about the public domain. So And I specifically wanted to ask you about, well, a few things. Is it too extreme or not extreme enough? Do you think about the things you create entering the public domain one day? And I think the biggest question is like, what would you like to play around with that's not in the public domain? And think deep about it. Because off the top of your head, it's like, oh, yeah, Castlevania. But really, is there like anything that's me, by the way. I'm doing an impression of myself.
Yeah.
You see? Yeah. So I brought up a few things about public domain just to kind of introduce this. And so this is Wikipedia, and just so people know exactly what I'm talking about. It says, quote, works are in the public domain if they are not covered by the intellectual property right known as copyright, or if the intellectual property rights to the works have expired. Works automatically enter the public domain when the copyright has expired. The United States Copyright Office is the federal agent that maintains copyright records. All works first published or released in the United States before January 1st, 1929 have lost their copyright protection, effective January 1st, 2024. In the same manner, works published in 1929 will enter the public domain as of January 1st, 2025, and this cycle will repeat until works published in 1977 enter the public domain on January 1st, 2073. Works of corporate authorship will continue to adhere to the 95-year term following the 2073 date. So, and this goes on, you know more about this than I do, Dig, but I think Sonny Bono was the one that really pushed getting that changed, right? In the 90s, like getting that, because it's to the extreme, like 95-year limit or whatever. I think it's pretty sure he was a seminal character in that in the 90s.
I didn't know that. I know Disney was a big proponent of that in the 70s because they saw what was happening with the stuff dating back to early Walt, like 20s and 30s. They knew time was running out in the 80s, so they kind of got ahead of it in the late 70s, as far as I know. And then in the 80s, kind of lobbied for it to get expanded again. That's why Steamboat Willie just entered the public domain. It was supposed to go like 40 years ago, and they kept lobbying to extend it. And I think, so I didn't know about Sonny Bono, but I know Disney was really instrumental in that.
So they have some examples here of things that have recently entered the public domain. So in 2019, The Murder on the Links, which is the Agatha Christie, obviously, novel, and The Ten Commandments, which is the old 20s film, entered the public domain. And then 2020, A Passage to India, the E.M. Forster book, and So Big, the Edna Ferber book, enter the public domain, and so on and so forth, to the point where in 2021, Great Gatsby, 2022, Don Juan.
Holy shit.
2023, the film Metropolis, which is a famous film.
Fritz Lang.
And then 2024, obviously, Steamboat Willie and others. So what I wanted to ask you guys to begin with is, how do you feel about this level of protection? I'll present it to you like this. I think it's insane that there's that level of protection on any created work. That allows for generational exploitation of works that have nothing to do with the creator, and like whether it's through family or corporation. So Disney's kind of a mix of both. And it's frustrating to me. Now, I say this as someone who creates things in quotes, and I've said this on Sacred to Chris, where I don't expect anyone's going to want to remake Habroxia or gives a shit about it. But the point is that I'm willing to put the things I've come up with and written. I'm like, yeah, take it. Like, not right away, but maybe in 50 years or 30. I mean, imagine we are not going to get Star Wars in the public domain in our lifetime, probably, really. Right. I mean, or at least in a conceivable way. And that kind of sucks. But I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, because people thought, and I was reading about this a little bit, that public domain in the early United States was like 25 years. And then it went up to 40 years and 50 years and 60 years and so on and so forth. So it was never quite right. But yeah, so Dig, I'll go to you first on this. And obviously Steamboat Willie is a huge example of this. But yeah, what do you think about the public domain and the way it kind of protects creations, including your own creations?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, man. I mean, I'm of two minds. Like, there's kind of a frosted side and a wheat side to my opinion, I think. You know what I mean? Like, I think I understand the purpose of it in theory of putting things into public domain, especially when it comes to creative works. It's a little odd, but you know, I know the theory is to evolve, revisit, improve, modernize, you know, expand on, breathe new life into it. And also to ensure that things don't just fade into obscurity and die out of, the public recollection. So I get it in theory, but there's definitely that purist side of me that's just like, listen, Romeo and Juliet's one of the great stories. I get it. I love that story, but maybe it's time for something new as well. But then you could argue too, like you could have the old, reinvent it, breathe new life into it, but also have something new. I get it. I think my opinion was formed once you sent this email last night, Colin. I was like, all right, let me think about things that I love, that I miss, that I would love to come back. And then I started to think about things that I really, really love, like the things that are at the top of my heart as far as things I've enjoyed in my life. So I thought about Calvin and Hobbes, of course, right? Be really cool to get Calvin and Hobbes back someday. But then again, do I really want Calvin and Hobbes if it isn't under the authorship of Bill Watterson? Do I want a different kind of Calvin and Hobbes? I'm not really sure about that. You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely that part of me. It's just like, maybe let the old things die and like, let's get some new stuff, especially in this world where everything's just kind of reinvented and rebooted and all that kind of thing. Then I thought of a comic book that I really love, but I was like, you know what? I would love to personally have a crack at that. So for the 10 people listening that actually know what this is, there was an old indie comic, I say old, 90s through the aughts, called Scud, the Disposable Assassin. It was written by Dan Harmon.
That's Dan Harmon.
Everybody knows from Community and Rick and Morty. And it was drawn by a guy named Rob Schraub, who was Dan's partner in crime, and I think still is. Like they were the tag team duo of a bunch of movies, and they wrote for the Sarah Silverman program and all that kind of stuff. But their origins dated back to creating this comic book. It was an indie book under Fireman Press, which was an indie publisher at the time. I think it eventually ended up with Image, but it was a great comic book, super whimsical, funny, and cool, about kind of an alternate reality where assassins could be purchased out of vending machines. And you could set this assassin on a certain target. And the whole conceit was, once the assassin eliminated the target, the assassin would die. And it would come full circle. It was very clean and tidy. This one assassin, Scud, becomes self-aware, realizes that when he eliminates his target, he's going to die. So the whole thing is about his adventure of trying to stay alive. Has to keep his target on life support so he doesn't die. And it's like this whole self-aware robot, very cool kind of graffiti meets very whimsical, very smart writing, very offbeat. And they just ended it. They just kind of ended it. They went on to bigger things. And that's one book where I'm like, that kind of deserves a reintroduction to the people who loved it, but even more so people that never even knew it, even though they might know Dan Harmon and Rob Schraub to some degree. Like, look where these guys started with this amazing comic book that precious few people know about. So that would be one thing. You know, of course, you think of the Star Wars thing. How crazy would it be for Star Wars to be in the public domain?
It would be wild.
Now people could do whatever they want with it.
Exactly. It would be insane. Like, at some point, that would be kind of cool. You know,
it would be cool on one hand, but would it get too crazy? Does it need some kind of shepherd? Can it just be this unchecked thing that just gets so crazy and out of hand? You know, I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure. Yeah. I can't think of too many things that I would want to see. Like, everybody's talking about, I'm not sure exactly how this works. The comic book guys would know out there, but I see a lot of talk about Batman.
It's funny. That was in my notes.
Approaching.
Yeah.
And how crazy that's going to be. Because I love the idea of taking something dark and making it light, or taking something light and making it dark. Like, giving something a whole different tone is very appealing to me. Mm-hmm. And people could have a lot of fun with something iconic like Batman, because it's iconic on so many fronts. It's iconic from a story. It's iconic with its origins. It's iconic with its publisher. It's iconic graphically. The different artists that have changed hands over the years. But I mean, I guess, and that's the thing, that like, that's the wheat side, is like the more conservative side, who's like, I don't know, I'm too much of a purist. I kind of like it the old way. Like, I don't want it to be too much. And then the frosted side is like, let's have at it. Like, everybody should take a crack. You know, that type of
Everybody
thing.
should have a ride.
That comes up a lot lately.
Yeah, I don't know why that quote keeps coming up. Yeah, I present it to you like this, Chris. I want to hear what you have to say about this, but this is going to be a weird one for people, I think, because I think people have this assumption about my politics in certain ways and the way I feel about things. But I believe that truly entrenched institutional wealth is incredibly dangerous. So what I mean by that is, I don't think it's bad for like a person to have $100 million and then their family's set for 5 generations, basically. Like that's not the kind of money I'm talking about.
Right.
It's like the kind of money. So when I think about a company like Disney being able to squat on Star Wars like that and extract value out of it, as opposed to having this constant looming threat of everything it does being taken from it. See, Dagan was saying earlier about like doing new things. I think that would force people to do new things constantly, because they would, because you would have you're going to enter all these things enter the public domain and everyone's going to fight over them. And you're going to have all these fucking interpretations of them, or just keep making new shit. And that forces you to spend a lot of your capital at these big companies on constant creative energy. And it erodes their ability to kind of just be like, fucking Mickey Mouse. Like that's a big hit, isn't it? And it's like, yeah, that's cool, man. Can you extract value out of it in 40 years? You know? And then it goes away. Like, why is that so impossible for people to imagine? The only beneficiaries are the big companies. And these, and these, like J.K. Rowling, for instance, right? Like her estate is going to control this many billions of dollar IP until 2090 or something, you know,
something like
that.
Is
that really
something like that? Yeah.
She's great and she's brilliant, but her beneficiaries are going to be like her great grandchildren. And it's like, is that really the spirit of the creativity? Why would we allow that? You know? Yeah, I guess is what I'm saying. So I don't know what you think.
No, I feel very similarly. I feel like 30 to 40 years is entirely appropriate. That's, in fact, I think that might be even more, like significantly more than is necessary. I think, you know, at a certain point, you know, how there are only so many stories to tell in so many universes. You know what I mean? Like I know there's this idea where it's like, oh, well, you can just keep doing new things within the same universe. It's like, you could, but like, I mean, like, dude, wouldn't you rather just do something entirely different? And wouldn't you rather just like kind of be like, you do what you need to do with this franchise? Usually the shelf life of like the peak of a series is about, I feel like maybe within 10 years anyway. So you're getting a lot of backwash for the remaining 30 years. And maybe you can strike gold again. Maybe it's possible. Doom kind of did that in some way, you know, like, but it's very few and far between that things are able to do that. Things are able to recapture the glory from like when they were like initially really huge. So I think 30 to 40 years is entirely appropriate. Like you said, I think it does force people to kind of, or it does force these companies into a state of, you know, they can't really rest as easy, which, I mean, if you control that amount of capital, you really kind of shouldn't be resting easy. Or if you control that amount of IP, you should constantly be stressed about, you know, the responsibility you have and the time running out and, you know, what you're able to do in a limited amount of time. Like that should be something that stresses you out, because that's, in my opinion, that is the cross that you bear in exchange for that insane amount of wealth and power and all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, just to bring it back, I love the fact that you brought up Scud. That's probably the first time.
I love that you know it, Chris.
Yeah. He's a big fan.
Because you're young.
Yeah, well, I was very big into the Channel 101 stuff. Like when Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland and Ryan Ridley and all those guys were doing internet stuff. They had that show on VH1, Acceptable TV, that I thought was like really brilliant.
I don't even know it.
Yeah, it was like, I mean, it's a bit of an aside, but like they had like this show where they would pitch. The whole concept of the show was like there would be 5 original pilots, like short form pilots, like 2 minutes each. And an entire 30-minute block would be taken up by those small pilots. And then people would vote for like the ones that they wanted to get renewed. And then the ones that were canceled were just like they were gone. And then the next episode, and then you'd get the next episode of the next show until people weren't feeling it anymore. And then they would cancel, and then they would replace it with a new pilot and stuff like that. It's very interesting. And very cool. I remember they had homeless James Bond as one of the, which is really hilarious. Because there's like, here's a gadget, Mr. Bond. What is it? It's cologne, so you can smell okay for a little bit. And it's like, was really good. It's like really fun and really scrappy, really low budget, really fun, like really cool. So it's really cool to see anybody notice what Scud is. But but that would be awesome to see that. You know what I mean? Like it would be cool to see like somebody who cares about it be like, yeah, let's do it, because they don't care about it anymore. Like there's no way they give a shit about it. Right. So like the original people are far beyond it. It's not something that they're going to be revisiting. Anybody that would inherit it is somebody that just sort of fell in the lap of. And that's kind of what you end up with Star Wars now, where it's like the people who have control of Star Wars now don't care about Star Wars. And I'm not saying that as somebody who's like a Star Wars fan. I don't give a shit about Star Wars either. I don't want it at all. I just say this is like a natural, like, hey, dude, like they don't care, but they have it. And so they're going to milk it. Wouldn't it be better if you gave the opportunity to people who actually care about it to go do something cool with it? Like, wouldn't that be better than getting, slop from a corporation that really has no attachment to it at all, other than they just happen to have found themselves in the ownership of this IP? I think, I don't know, like, because I think about concepts that I would love to see that I feel like just won't happen because they're so divorced, or they're so, and by the way, sometimes that can work out in the IP's favor. Like sometimes, like, if something lasts for a long time, the company is big and it's a profitable IP, and then people vie for a job in that space, and then they end up in that position. But that's a really hard fought place to be. It's not as accessible to the people who might actually be better for it. You don't know. It very well could be that some kid in India has the perfect Spider-Man story.
Sure.
And yeah, that's very possible. I've always had this fascination. I've always had this idea of like, man, I would love to see Spider-Man in like the Wild West, where like he can't swing necessarily, but he still has these abilities, and like I would love to see that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Like you'd have to really think around it. Like how is this going to, like, how would this work? I would be enthralled to take a crack at writing that, because I love Spider-Man. But I'm not gonna fucking work. I'm not gonna try and work for Marvel. I'm not gonna like work my way up through Marvel first of all, work your way up as if that's even possible today. But the idea that that's the only way that you would get to work on an IP that you love is that you have to like kind of end up in this really, desperate corporate structure that may or may not even yield any results is kind of, I don't know. I think that's really disappointing. And I think it limits a lot of creativity. The other side to the coin, though, is that I have been a little bit disappointed with the way that people have used things that have entered the public domain. Things like Infestation 88, that Steamboat Willie horror game, or even just like the Winnie the Pooh horror movie. Like, is this really like the best that you can do with this? Like, right. Like is it really just this? It's like, oh,
the Winnie the Pooh thing was novel, so that was like not so bad. But now it seems like that's what everyone's going to do,
right? Yeah. Like because the Steamboat Willie game, and now it's like, all right, are we just going to do this? We're just going to do like, what's the opposite?
What's the darkest? What
if Spider-Man was a pedophile instead? Right. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like there's some degrees where it's like, okay, I get it. You're doing the shock value thing. You're kind of jumping in while it's hot. And I imagine that the people who would have anything to do about these, who would have any good ideas for these IP, realistically would probably take a while for them to materialize, because that's kind of the price of care in the first place. So obviously, like on day one, you're going to get a lot of bullshit. But
right, that's true.
But there is also the argument that, the things that happen to have entered the public domain so far just aren't really things that resonate with people today in the way that certain things will in the future. Like we know Spider-Man will be relevant by the time he enters the public domain. Like I really can't imagine that not being true. Batman has been relevant for as long as he has been. And what's he at? Like how many years before Batman enters the public domain? Or before he should?
I don't know.
What is it?
When does Batman?
It's weirdly, it's not far off in comparison, and Batman's still going strong.
Yeah.
2034.
Dude, that's really close. We because of the Insomniac leak, that makes me feel like it's super close. But I think, yeah, I mean, it would be so fucking fascinating to see people who give a shit, who really care about Batman, who like now don't have to enter this weird corporate structure to get a crack at that, who don't have to schmooze, who don't have to like, oh yeah, I love this person. Let's pander to the people at this company so I can get a crack at this thing. You know, that's going to happen, and it's going to be interesting to see that. So that might be the counterpoint to that. It's like maybe just that, you know, nobody gives a shit about Steamboat Willie
right
today. Like, not really. Like, he's a historically important figure for animation, but like kids aren't. I don't even think most people are even aware that that's Mickey Mouse or a variation of him. Honestly,
yeah, it's so far removed from modern Mickey that's just like what you know, like
yeah,
it could be any. It's just a cartoon.
It's it might as well be public domain at this point. Anyway, and that is also something I wanted to touch on, was the fact that like I wonder if it will even matter to people like me who grew up in a time where like internet stuff was in some ways just as valid and sometimes more valid than stuff that you would see on TV. You know,
Sure.
like, I mean, I don't know, like there's a lot of parody and satire in early online video that I remember loving way more than, you know, The Simpsons. You know, like I could give a shit less about The Simpsons, really. But like Happy Tree Friends and shit like that, you know, like that was top tier shit when I was in school. And so I don't know, part of me wonders if this is even important in the first place, because I feel like the people who are clever enough to get their way around public domain have done so pretty well online. You know, like through satire, through parody, through homages. And sometimes maybe even that's like a good way to garner creativity too. It's like, how do we, like, that's almost like a framework that you have to, it's almost like a track that you have to keep yourself on to avoid, like, okay, so how do I make Batman without making Batman? And that in and of itself is its own like very creative exercise. And that's how you end up with like all sorts of things that are popular today. So like, I don't know, I think there's validity to the idea that like, the public domain kind of forces people to come up with new things. I also do feel like things are just held on for way too long. I think it keeps too much power centralized in people who, like, by the time it's even up for debate, don't really have any stake in it. I don't know. It's a complicated issue, but ultimately, like, I think 30 to 40 years is more than enough.
Yeah,
like if you
quicker
can't,
cycle.
Yeah, if you can't extract value out of something in 40 years, like I don't know what to fucking tell you. Like maybe you should get a new
speed it up by half type of thing. You know, I like what Chris is saying too about you don't really know what you're getting when it pops into the public domain. Now everybody has their hands on it. Everybody gets a crack at it, right? And you don't know if you're getting good or bad. But here's the comforting thing that we can relate to as Star Wars fans. No matter what you do with it, you're always going to have the originals, the original versions, the original work is not going to go away. We've always comforted ourselves that we have the original 3 Star Wars movies. You know, everything else has sucked.
Yeah, Disney Star Wars is fan fiction anyway. So seriously, it's like at this point, it's like, I don't know. They came in and said our Star Wars was fan fiction, our, you know, Timothy Zahn novels and all this kind of stuff. But I you know who I think about in this regard too, Dig, is Tolkien, just in the sense of, and famously, you know, his son Timmy Tolkien. That's a Sacred Symbols joke. But these guys kind of and his family over time kind of just in some, I don't want to say bastardizing it, but kind of where it's like, this is an official entry into the lore of Lord of the Rings. And it's like, who the fuck are you? You know, right. At some point it's like, you're no different. That there are 1,000 people out there that know this shit better than you. Just because you're related, you get to kind of continue to milk this thing. And I just think it's kind of gratuitous, but it is the form of owning a factory and then handing it down to your child. And I totally get it. But I just think the spirit of human creation is just so different than that. Why would we want to defend the corporations and and what I would consider somewhat greedy individuals that went to bat to make these numbers so extreme? Like, oh, Disney's the one who did it.
Yeah.
You know? Like, yeah. And like Dagan said, they were so afraid of all these things entering the public domain. And it's like, if you're that bereft of fucking creativity, maybe you shouldn't exist anymore anyway. Maybe Disney should be an historical brand.
Yeah.
But, so I don't.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse was a weird kind of anomaly though, because it became a logo, became an icon, it became the front man, it became animated character. It became this giant entity across media. It was the representation of a corporate. I mean, you guys are right to kind of finger the corporations.
Whoa.
Because I love what you guys said. I love the idea of holding the company's feet over the fire to avoid that creative complacency. It's like, do something with what you have instead of sitting on a copyright.
Well,
or let people, or get, let it breathe. Like, give it some new life.
think about it. Think about just this. I don't know why this came to mind, but Indiana Jones, right? It's like, okay,
Sure.
Indiana Jones came, Lucas and Spielberg, and they came up with this idea. How much did it cost them to create, like, to kind of just meld that idea together? Let's say they spent a few $1 million just kind of spitballing, getting everything together, test shots and all the rest. Then they film it and it costs, 20 or 30 or $40 million, whatever it costs or whatever. It's like, okay, so now you're on the clock. Like, how much do you expect to extract out of that original fucking, like that specific initial investment? Like, you get to work off of that cheap investment about an archaeologist, like, adventurer for fucking 95 years, and no one else gets a chance to, like, do something like that. I don't know. That's strange to me. Like, why would anyone want that? I don't know. I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, there is that thing of keeping it in house to keep it in house. It's very thoughtless. It's almost like it's just done that way because that's the way it's been done. Like, nobody's thinking outside the box, and the fact that this could be obviously behoove us, you know what I mean? And I think there's something also that is kind of restricting, like Chris is saying, he would love to have a crack at Spider-Man, but not under Marvel. Yeah, there is something really kind of limiting about working under that corporate banner, that there's just a better shot of actual real life creativity, I think, when you could really have a voice and do something your own way, that type of thing. And I love the fact too of, like, maybe that kind of brings you back to the drawing board of, like, let's create new things instead of just rebooting everything. Into a reboot, going back. I love nostalgia, but, cashing in on nostalgia and going back to the well over and over again for the same 10 IPs, that's the thing. That's the thing I constantly think about. And I think this probably dates back to around Chris's generation of growing up, where it's like, what are you guys claiming as the things you grew up with that were original? You know what I mean? Like, by the time you guys came around, everything was getting rebooted already. You know what I mean? Where we grew up with actual original things in the 70s and 80s. And that at some point that stopped. Can we go back to that?
That was, I think, a little bit more Gen Z than it was. Because, like, I don't know. Like, I remember, like, we still got, like, original cartoons and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we still got, like, Dexter's Lab and Ed, Edd n Eddy and all these.
That's true.
Like,
you guys came up during that
and
age,
even movies. I guess the most we got necessarily that was kind of like that was, I guess, like, adaptations of things. You know what I mean? Like, we got adaptations of Spider-Man, or, like, adaptations of Lord of the Rings, or, like, adaptations of Lord of Ring. We got adaptations of Harry Potter and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But they were still kind of, like, around that. I don't know. Like, I point to, like, that Total Recall reboot, which was 20.
I forgot about that.
I can't remember the year. I think it was like. I don't think it was in the 2000s though. I think I was, like, out of high school.
There's a 1991, and that's the original. Then 2012 is the remake.
Yeah, 2012. So, like,
was that recent?
Yeah, so that was. I would say that's where it really started. Like, in the 2010s is when things started getting, like, because 2007, like 2000, like, I don't, like, I guess you did have the Indiana Jones movie, like that fourth one, where they were just like, hey, here's a fourth one, Crystal Skull, and that was like, whatever, like, garbage. I don't know about that, but
trash.
But now it's like, like the late 2010s was all like Thundercats is back, and, like, it's that. Then it did get pretty fucking egregious. I don't know. But then the counterpoint to Indiana Jones is, like, if anybody could do anything that they wanted with Indiana Jones, like, would we have gotten, like, Tomb Raider, or like, would we have gotten Uncharted? Like, would it have made more sense for Naughty Dog to be like, well, making a new IP, let's just do fucking Indiana Jones?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that there are some.
So there is. Yeah. Well, so I'm saying, so there is, like, But at the same time, how old is Indiana Jones? Is that 80s?
81, right?
81. So
80 might have been Raiders.
81, 85, 89, something like that. Yeah.
Something like that.
All right. Well, let's assume it's like 81. So you have 91, 10 years, 2001. 40 years would still be enough to kind of inspire that creativity. You know what I mean? Like you would still get your Tomb Raider. You would still get your Uncharted. And then at a certain point, the IP would lapse. And then you'd get a lot of people who are interested in maybe taking a crack at that IP. Like, I don't know. I think it's important to have these protections because I do think it forces people to think outside of the box and like do things like kind of like, how can we do this without doing this? Like it kind of makes people do really interesting things. But at the same time, like, yeah, 100 fucking years is so goddamn egregious. And I just don't see the purpose of it. And the alternate point too is like sometimes, I mean, we're seeing lazy adaptations of things or lazy uses of public domain stuff now. But like, I don't know, who knows? Like in some odd amount of years, we might get some interesting thing. I think Castlevania is a great example of something that used, because Bram Stoker's Dracula, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was all, that's all just in the lore of Castlevania. And it arguably kind of transformed it and made it its own thing to the point where it's almost like very secondary. And I almost wonder like what it would be like to have a Star Wars version of that. Like what would it be like to have something that treated the original trilogy or like the original Star Wars movies as their foundations for lore? Almost like, hey, this is like the story of Luke and Han and Leia. Like that's a religion in this world. Or like that's a long, long time ago in this world.
Sure.
Or like, and you could use that. You could use it without necessarily like resting on it, without being like, let's get Mark Hamill's CGI face. Like that's what interests me the most is like not necessarily seeing how people adapt certain things, but seeing how people use certain things that are established as foundations for new universes. Because I think that's what a lot of creatives do, like as an exercise, like on their own without even really thinking about it. Like a lot of creativity is born of like, well, what would it be like if this was this, but like it evolved into some other thing.
Yeah.
And you are really restricted in that now because you have to, think about how many backstories are really just, versions of things we've seen already, but with different names. It's like when you see it, it's pretty obvious. I'm having a hard time remembering like specific examples, but like sometimes you see things and it's like, oh, here's the lore of this. And it's like, oh, that's Lord of the Rings. Like you're doing Lord of the Rings, but like, that's not, the Frodo is Angelion or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. Gets silly after a while.
By the way,
I like what you're saying though about, I don't know, there's something kind of cool. I never really thought about it like that before. Like taking the finger and grafting on the body.
Right.
Like keeping it in the universe, but only kind of in spirit. Then you have like 95% of the room to do what you want.
Yeah,
with that 5% attached to something.
Exactly. And you don't have to do that awkward thing where it's like, obviously this is based on this, but we can't say it. It's just an open fucking secret. And it's just like, all right, well, just do it then. Like, why not? Why not just do it?
I was going to say just to put to circle it back around, Indiana Jones 81, 84, 89. I was close. I said 81, 85, okay. 89. So yeah, that's when those come from. And I think what I was going to say was going to express earlier was that I think you guys are bringing up a lot of great points that make it kind of a double-edged sword where you almost, the sad reality is you kind of almost get the same outcome either way, because one thing that didn't come up, which I thought of, which I was like, this is where they would probably make a shit ton of money, is let's say you have a 50-year, let's say Star Wars was on a 50-year cycle and it would be going in 2027, right? But only the original. That's important to note. Like you'd be like, oh yeah, so now we can have like, an ad and all that. It's like, no, not yet. You get to get everything from this original film that's in 1977. And then you can introduce the stuff in 80 and 83 and so on and so forth. But you can imagine a world with smaller gaps where companies would actually sell the rights to another company or entity for enormous amounts of money to extract last minute value out of it before it entered the public domain. So imagine if you owned something like Star Wars and 5 years before everyone's like, it's gonna be fucking awesome. And you already know that there's bubbling under the surface of people starting to spin things up and all of that. But you sell the rights to another company for those last 5 years and they just exploit the shit out of it before it enters the public domain. Like you'll see cottage industry probably like that pop up, which would just even destroy the IP even more. So I think there's like a double-edged sword to all of this stuff, which makes it more complicated. So early in the US, like I was reading about this, the first trademark stuff was 25 years, which is too short in my opinion, but actually kind of makes sense when you think everyone then was living to like 45, right? So but
good point.
And I think it could even be like within the law could even be, and this would even get shady too, because you'd be like, oh, this guy got fucking assassinated by his kids or some shit. But like, it could be like the lifetime of the creator plus 25 years or something like that, right? Or there could be just some law like that where it's like, this can't be extracted. The value out of this will be parlayed only into your progenitors, like one generation up, but like, and you'll make lots of money maybe and be able to kind of, but you'll need to figure something else out after that. And because I'm looking for ways to get away from the creativity for a second. I'm looking for ways to puncture like enormous stockpiles of money in the United States, like that don't need to be made and sat on like gold hoards to this degree. And it's strange to me that we kind of, why are we not allowed to patent things for more than 10 or 20 years? I think meds are patented for 6 years, but you can trademark an idea. Right? Yeah.
I mean,
that's where generic drugs come from, you know, like I think it's 6 or 8 years or something like that. Like there's and I think that's great. That's the point.
To break up monopolies. And
right.
All that.
It's like, you don't want people to, and those are important things, obviously, but you don't want, their whole argument is like, you can extract value out of your cancer medicine in 6 years and then you can still sell it.
Right.
But other people are going to have access to the formula. And I'm like, okay, so you obviously don't want it to be that short, but like this 95-year thing, it's like, damn, dude, that's crazy. In my opinion, that needs to be dealt with. And the unfortunate reality is that dealing with it would only be for further flung generations, because you probably couldn't grandfather a bunch of shit in and be like, well, you wrote this and created this under the auspices of this particular doctrine. So you'd actually be doing it only for people further flung. And you're probably right that it ultimately wouldn't matter. And there's a lot of downside to it too. But I wanted to ask you guys as we close up, I don't want to linger on this too long, but I was curious if anything came to mind for you, like random things that you would grab from the IP, like from that you would pull into public domain or want access to or would want to fuck around with. And I have a few I wanted to talk about here. Batman was one of them. So you already brought that up, and that's a funny one, and that'll be an interesting one to see how people deal with that. We'll see that in our lifetime, which is cool. But
yeah, that's pretty.
I had 3 other ones. So obviously you have the obvious ones. I didn't want to get into those like Mega Man or Castlevania. I don't want to adapt those. I would actually like to make a real Mega Man game or a real Castlevania game. So it's almost not what you're talking about here. Yeah. But one thing I thought of, and they have revived this a couple times, but it's never quite right, and I think it could still be exploited, is the Twilight Zone. And it's a bummer that like Black Mirror is the closest we've gotten to that, but Black Mirror is kind of not sustained its quality level. And it's also it's not omnidirectional. Like it's all about tech. There's not a random one about like some old time shit or whatever. Like Twilight Zone is so fucking well executed. And the reason that I think it could work again is because it was already written by a bunch of different people anyway. So that's one. And then another one I thought of was that I think could be made into something so much cooler is TMNT. Like that whole universe is so good, and watching people play with that I think would be really fun. But the biggest one I wanted to talk about, because I think that this is a universe that's rife for significant levels of storytelling, and I don't know why. Well, I know why, because it's not a huge property, but why there's not more pursuit to tell more and deeper stories into this is Battlestar Galactica. And the whole like idea of a human race creating a robotic race that turns on it, they fight a war, the Cylon or the robots disappear, come back, destroy everyone, kill everyone except for those in transit, and then the Cylons just pursue them to try to kill the rest of them, and that's the whole story. Everything in there is like is there's so much rife storytelling in there, and it'll be cool. Now, I think NBC is developing a new Battlestar Galactica, but I think it's just a reboot of the reboot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So those are just a few of the things that I thought will never see the light of day in my lifetime, probably. Because even when you get Battlestar Galactica, like the 70s one, that'll be like, well, yeah, you can adapt the 70s one, but you can't adapt the 2003 one.
Where did we watch that, Kyle? Was that on Peacock at the time?
Yeah, it's on Peacock.
All right, so NBC Universal owns it.
Yeah, NBC owns it because it was on Sci-Fi.
Okay.
Which, yeah, NBC
Interesting.
owns
Very interesting.
Do you guys have any that come to mind for you before we move on to Chris's topics?
Chris, do you want to go first?
I don't know. Like, so the question is
there just anything that's not going to enter the public domain in your lifetime, realistically, that you think would be interesting to see enter the public domain and see what people could do with it?
Oh man, I mean, outside of the obvious ones, I'm not super sure. Like things that are going to exit the public, I'm not under the illusion that I would really. The obvious ones obviously are like Halo and stuff like that. Like I think it would be so cool to see like what average people could do with that. Spider-Man I already brought up. Although I think Spider-Man, what is that, 50s? How old is Spider-Man? Actually,
that's
I don't know.
A good question. I want to say 50s.
Yeah, I feel like I remember his 60th anniversary kind of recently or something like that.
August 1962. Amazing.
Okay,
Fantasy
62. Holy
I'm not seeing that. I'm not.
Yeah, so that I think would be 20. Actually, it would be 2057. I think. Yeah. So we'll be in the old
film
at that point.
Yeah. And even that really is just. Although, like I said, like I would love. Like, and I don't mean like a joke Wild West Spider-Man. Like there was like a Spider-Man riding like a Wild West Spider-Man on a horse for like 10 seconds. I think in Spider-Verse. I don't remember if it was the first one or the second one, but one of those Spider-Verse movies.
I don't remember that.
But like that was like kind of played for laughs. Like I really want like a genuine like fistful of dollars Red Dead Redemption 2.
I love that idea, dude.
Wild West Spider-Man who has like a
no
mask
web slinging.
No web slinging. Like he can, but it's useless.
Where's he gonna go?
In the context that it's useful for like somebody in like a metropolis. Like you'd have to use it like tripwires and actual traps and stuff. Whoa. Like I just think it's like interesting. I don't know. I have a lot of things like that I would love to see. But an obscure one that I think that obviously is probably I'll be long dead is I really love Oddworld. And I really think there's so much there that just hasn't really been mined in a way that I would like to see. It hasn't really been taken advantage of. Like that world is so interesting. The art direction of that world is so interesting. That the ambience of that world is so interesting. Like what it is, what is happening, like the races at play. I think it's beautiful. I think what it's trying to say is beautiful, and just fascinating. But that's like a 90s property, so that's way beyond. But that's the one that came to mind as something that is realistically outside of the purview that I would ever see. But yeah.
Dave, do you have any to conclude?
I love calling out Oddworld. That's awesome. I mean, Chris and I talked about Scud. I would just say, that's one of those things, Scud, the comic, and then the expanded comic universe of that whole world. There was a comic book called La Casa Nostroid, which was kind of like a Godfather with cyborgs. And then there was another offshoot comic called Drywall and Oswald. So that whole Scud cinematic universe, it's just like one of those things that was so ripe for an animated series or an animated film, especially, would have been amazing. Yeah. Like it almost seems like a sin that never came to fruition. Especially, with everything that transpired with Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon doing Rick and Morty and stuff. I was like, this was a gimme, which is, there was an obscure Sega Genesis game of Scud. Not a lot of people know about, but that's as far as it got outside of the books. And I think Fireman Press is no more. And I think the last 4 issues of Scud went under the Image banner just so Rob Schraub could finish it up. So that was kind of a sin. The only other thing I really think about that would be cool to see what people could do with, and don't get me wrong, I love Ridley Scott, but I would love to see what people could do more with Aliens. I think that's a universe that's kind of, I think Aliens fans have been robbed. We have gotten things beyond the initial 2 movies. And, we have the 3rd movie and the 4th movie and then the recent 2 films and some comics and stuff. But there was a lot of I think it's frustrating even as a passing Aliens fan because of we know what we could have gotten by certain directors and stuff like that were shot down. So that would be one that I could, something in animation would be amazing with Aliens.
Well, you're about to get the real life version of Aliens, so.
That's true.
Be patient.
That's a good point. Yeah. I just want to, on the way out, I want to sell you guys something. I want to pitch you something. This is kind of a version of what Colin was saying. And I don't know if this is a bridge too far as telling entertainment companies or corporations what they could do, but what if you have something like this? What if you have a 30 or 40 year period where your copyright's protected, your IP's insured, right? And then the last 10 years of that, let's say 30 to 40 years or 40 to 50 years, there's a mandatory RFP that you have to put out. So now you put out that request for pitches over that last decade where you have to, you still have ownership. So you still stand to profit, but now you have to, there's gotten, this could get complicated with different rules in places, but now you have to send things out to evergreen your IP and see what people could do with it. And maybe in that set of laws or rules or whatever, you have to greenlight 5 of the best things. That would be neat, because then the corporations would still stand to gain, but they would be less, they would be more likely to, put it out into the world and say, look, what can you do with this thing? That would be neat. Again, I don't know if that's too big brother for the entertainment industry, but that would be a cool way to kind of get the best of both worlds, I think.
I just like the idea of people being able to even just publish and adapt things. Like I really like the old Barnes and Noble series of classics. Most of the, you can go right now and read The Scarlet Letter on the internet. It's free. Like you don't have to pay any money for it. It's been in the public domain forever, but it's cool that they publish these like $3 or $4 versions, at least when I was like in high school and college. And often they would even sell annotated versions. And that's the kind of cool shit too. Like the more, and this is what Chris was saying more about the fair use stuff. That's the stuff that bothers me about a lot of sports coverage, which is very heavily licensed, and they'll fucking kill you if you go after, if you use NFL footage or something like that, which is so crazy. And I brought up the idea to Jaffe, Twitch, Amazon has the Thursday night football games. They own Twitch. It's like, wouldn't it make a lot of sense to let people stream the games if you have a Twitch and Amazon account, and then commentate over them and like do custom commentation and stuff? It's like, there's all these obvious ways to please everyone and still make your money. And maybe
you could probably expand viewership even. Yeah. Like it's a shame. That is a shame. I've thought about that before. It's like, it's a shame that there are no like self-made in the way that the internet has made self-made like Let's Players or personalities. Like it's a shame that there are no self-made internet like sports commentators. Like I feel like there are probably a lot that could have done that very well and could probably do it very well that just won't be able to do it because it's the licensing rules around it are so fucking needlessly strict.
Right. And that's why that it's such a good observation, Chris, because that's why I think it forces the known quantities outside of the main. So like it's why ESPN still has so much power and all these guys, because they have, by virtue of licensing, they can show you the footage instead of just being a podcaster that can only talk about it. Or I watch some really great YouTube guys, but they just use like the grainiest, shittiest footage and like just still screens. And it's such good content, but they have no option to license the stuff. And so I just don't like little protective things like that just make your shit so precious. It's so strange to me that we would encourage that. But I also think that like I said, there are a lot of double edges to changing the status quo. Yeah. Well, thank you I'm fulfilled. Thank you for hearing me out here on the public domain. We got through the entire conversation, I think, without mentioning Pal World.
Oh yeah.
Well done.
I did. I will say I did think about it.
Yeah.
And I just
did you? I didn't even think. I don't even know how I didn't think about it.
Yeah. I
my entire life.
I just totally can't stand I already don't want to ever talk about the game again. So I'm so glad no one has.
I'm so done.
Yeah, me too.
Well, now you brought it up though.
I know.
I'm so can I just say real quick? I'm so disillusioned with the feedback on that. You guys have to understand. You guys are veterans. I'm new to doing a video game podcast, and I cannot believe that that genuine sentiment exists. Of it doesn't matter if it's copied or it's not copied. I'm like, are your eyes open, or are you looking at the inside of your?
There's
legs?
a lot of. That's a totally different topic, but there's a lot of. It would be interesting. This would actually be an interesting combination of people to talk about it at some point. There's this energy. I don't even know how to say it without sounding like a dickhead, because I don't mean to sound like a dickhead. When I use the term creative person, I'm not saying that that's better than someone else. I just want to be clear about that. Okay. With that said, I feel like there's an energy against the creative class because of the perception, perhaps accurate, that we have it easier than everyone else. Because though we work hard, it's for the humanities, for things that are not necessary. There is a major difference. And so when something goes after that kind of work, and I'm not even talking about it, I personally am not analyzing any of this shit from an employment standpoint, which, by the way, is its whole other fucking huge issue. But
it's another dimension.
But I am analyzing it just from like what you want out of creativity. And I think that there's just, I don't know if it's accurate or not, because it's hard to talk about without people thinking I'm talking down to you. Like, I'll just talk to you about myself. I'm a creative person. I'm not a mechanical person. I'm not a mathematical person. I'm none of those things, right? I'm not a strong person or any, like,
I think you're more mathematical than you'd like to think you are.
Well, perhaps. I don't know. Whatever. But you understand what I'm saying, where I'm not trying to talk down on anyone about what they do. But I think that I do identify this energy where it's like, no, fuck you guys. You know, like, and I don't know. I don't think that's everyone. I don't even think that's most people. But I certainly think that there is that sort of, you kind of see it with journalism right now, in some sense, mainstream journalism, as they get laid off by the thousands and thousands, and people are just dancing on their graves.
Is that new though, or is that just new to me because I've never done a specifically gaming podcast before?
I don't know, dude. I do think I've said this to you in the past. It's like, I think you're not used to receiving feedback because you're so likable and amenable to a lot of people that it's probably more striking to you when people push back on you. Because I read everything, so I see it. And like I said this to you in an email unrelated to this, where I'm like, you're not even near the splash damage of the fucking rockets that people send at our company about all the things we do. It's mostly about me and about how horrible I am or whatever. And you kind of get used to that about reading. I say a lot of things people disagree with. You just kind of put your shoulder into it and just continue to say whatever you want. And understand that you can actually, that though you didn't catch everyone, you did change people's minds, no doubt. And I actually brought up your soliloquy on punching up on sacred symbols, that I went back and listened to what you had to say, and I really agreed with you. But what I was saying was, specifically about Pal World, was it's about the spirit of the design.
Yes, right.
And people can't or won't disassociate that from everything else. They're like, but it's a fucking crafting game, and I'm like,
right. That surprised.
Why don't you understand? Like, you know, it's like one of those. It's like, what? You know, like, so we don't have to get into it, but I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I do think there is some sort of like shrugging, like, you guys aren't that important anyway energy, and so fuck you. I do think there's a little bit of that, and I don't blame people necessarily, because of my job, you know, I work hard, but it's not landscaping for 60 hours a week, and I get it. You know?
It's so mean though. Like, if somebody got laid off from a supermarket or some plumber got laid off, I would be empathetic. I know not everybody's the same, and it's not the disagreement. It's the fact that I think people that are pushing against what I was saying about Power World were being genuine. I think they genuinely don't care. Some of the sentiment was the quality's not important. Some of the sentiment is, who cares if it's copied? Some of the sentiment is, it's not copied. All of those things frustrating for me, but I do believe that many of those people think that way. The other thing is just how mean people could be about it, you know?
Yeah.
But that's the thing that you have to understand too, that I need to understand, is that not everybody carries themselves the same or has the same personality, you know? So yeah, it is new for me. It's new for me, but you know, and it's kind of like, I feel very live and let live about it, but yeah, it's definitely, this is a lesson for me, for sure.
Yeah. You have anything you want to add, Chris, before we move on?
No, we can move on. What are we what are we feeling? We'll go.
Yeah, go ahead. You make a choice.
Yeah, well, so my topic, we'll go with true crime.
Okay.
I want to save the other one for when there's more people to bounce off.
The other one is
awesome. Sure.
It's a good one. I think.
Yeah, it is. It is a wonderful one. Yeah. Put it in your hat. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll keep it under my hat. I'll feather in my cap. I got it. So we'll have so true crime is the subject that I kind of wanted to talk about, and more specifically, like, why. Like, first of all, is this content that we consume? Like, is this content that you guys consume? Is this content that you understand? Is it content that freaks you out? Is it weird that it is so popular despite the morbid nature of it? I find it so fascinating that women consume it so much. Like, it's like a really fascinating,
it's very female. Yeah.
And so you know, and I guess I don't know. I don't know necessarily what direction I wanted to go with it or what thread I wanted to pull specifically. I think I just kind of wanted to hand it off to you guys and just kind of see what you guys thought of it, because to me it almost feels like Live Leak light in some way, you know, like it's bizarre to me when people like obsess about it or willingly choose to like spend nights thinking about like, ooh, the toy box killer. I want to hear the entire tape he made for his victims, and it's an hour and a half, but I'll sit and watch it, and it's like, okay, I don't quite get this. And I've always not really understood it. I understand the morbid curiosity. Like I remember being very, very young and like finding Live Leak stuff and being like, oh, what the fuck? There's like a morbid curiosity about it that has, but it's not, I don't know. I don't willingly spend hours or even minutes of my life tracking that down as like an adult. And so the idea that people sit for like an hour every night and tune into like a brand new serial rapist story is just fucking bizarre to me. I don't know. But I wondered how you felt about it, if it's content that you consumed. Pull at any thread that you want. I guess I'll pass it off to Dagan first, because I'm very curious from an artist's perspective, I guess, if it's even remotely something that's a part of your life at all.
This is a great topic. I mean, this is not something I go in for, but I think I definitely understand the appeal. When I think about this sort of thing, I hope this isn't too controversial. I hope this doesn't make me even more crazy, but I know like
he's going to say, I thought you were going to say like, I'm a murderer. I hope that's not.
Please don't judge me.
But it was years ago. The statute of limitations.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
That type of thing.
I believe you canceled.
No, I was just going to say, like, with every passing day, I get more and more aware how crazy I am. Like, I'm completely out of my mind, you know. And I think a lot of people, you know, whether you're struggling with, you know, just your own sort of whatever you're dealing with in life, right? It's like, I think a lot of us are aware, like, we're all a little bit nuts. And I think there's something very comforting in watching stories about people that are crazier than you, that make you feel good about yourself. You know, like, all right, I am crazy, but I'm not this nuts. I'm not this demented, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's like a cathartic, you know, thing. I think it's like people are like measuring themselves against somebody who's really problematic, you know, that type of thing. At least, you know, I think that's probably a typical thing. I think that's probably one look. And then I think there's a fantasy aspect to it. It's like that cat and mouse thing, staying one step ahead of the law, being clever enough to dodge law enforcement. It's one of those things where you're putting yourself in that place. Like, if I did these things, would I be smart enough to get away with it? How would I do it? You know, that type of thing. It's kind of a sick form of entertainment, but I think it's a very understandable human thing of like putting yourself in that position. How would I have done it differently? How would I dodge the law? How would I not get caught? And, you know, sort of like definitely also that rubbernecking aspect of like just being intrigued by how sick a human being could be. I mean, it's a little bit irresistible even for somebody like me who's not into it. Like, I understand the draw for sure. But I do think a lot of it is that getting lost in something like, you know, I have problems in life. I'm worried about this. I'm a little crazy. My husband's crazy. My kids are nuts, whatever. Like, could be worse. And this is the thing that's worse. So it helps you put things a little bit in perspective.
That's interesting. Yeah, I that does make sense. I guess I can relate to that too. Like, because for me, historical true crime is more interesting to me. Like I think like the story of like Jack the Ripper. And stuff like
that's
that.
good shit.
Like, that's like fascinating. I had this thought a long time ago. It's like, what if Jack the Ripper's name was Jack, and they just guessed, and he got like freaked out by that and stopped. I always think about that, but like, I don't know. Colin, I'm curious, like what thread you want to pull from this, or if you identify with that at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. First of all, I am into this content. That's how I know it's such a female dominated thing, because it always just seems like women are more into it than men. And I subject Micah to a whole lot of it, although it comes in bursts because there's only so much and I'm not even talking about deep historical like Jack the Ripper stuff, but only so many things from the 50s, 60s, 70s before you like kind of know a lot of the big things. And it's kind of sad but true. It's like, oh, I already know the story of fucking John List. I already know the story of this, and I already know the story of that or whatever.
Yeah.
John List, I think, was the guy who in New Jersey in the 70s killed his family and then moved across the country and started a new life, and then no one found his family in the house dead for a few months. So he had like this huge lead on them and then lived a totally separate life and then was caught in the 90s, I want to say.
I don't know that one.
Dude, there's so many different crimes. I mean, there's so many different crimes. There's a crime, I think, in Belgium that was more recently, like in the last 15 years, where a guy had like, it was one of those horrifying things where he was like keeping a slave almost like under the house, like for years in this like soundproof thing. So the reality is if you keep going back, there's only so much. So you kind of have to let it rest for a little while and then go and find new content. That's the way it is with a lot of YouTube stuff. I'm not deeply enough into it where I listen to the 10 episode podcast arcs about these different crimes or whatever. But I do like watching the little documentaries. And there's actually a really great YouTube channel. It's a series of YouTube channels called EWU, EWU, Explore With Us. And people in the true crime community will certainly know that because they start every one of their videos and they say, "Hey, EWU crew." That's how they always start their videos. And but they like always tell these real life crime stories, and it's really fascinating stuff. And I also think that I wanted to write here that where does this begin? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out where it begins within our own like society. Jack the Ripper and pulp novels and stuff maybe, but when you think about Rescue 911 and the original America's Most Wanted, which is coming back actually, and even things like Cops and Cold Case Files and all of this, there's always been this weird appeal, just kind of multi-directional about crime. And maybe it goes into the same reason we're really into the end of the world as a people. Like people love the apocalypse. People love dystopia. People love the fall of government and these new fucked up things. I mean, they love it. I used to think when I was a kid that I was the one who loved that until I realized, no, actually everyone loves that. And there are little things like cultural phenomenons that remind you of that. Like the Hunger Games was a big one for me where I was like, oh yeah, people love this shit.
Yeah.
And
it's unthinkable, but there's a realism there that's compelling.
Right, exactly. And so it could all be one and the same. I don't really know, like, but even into Law and Order and NCIS and all these kind of procedurals, and then all the different kinds of true crime stuff you can watch, like, and I know this just from delving into it, where some people will be on camera and have real sophisticated editing, but some people just show body cam footage. And dude, I've watched hours and hours and hours of just straight up interviews with people in like the interview room when they're arrested or whatever, as they're confessing to crimes and stuff like that. Like there's so many different things and fucked up stories. I will say two ones that caught my attention recently, Micah and I both, that were like big cultural phenomenons that come to mind was the first one was the woman Gabby Petito. I don't know if that name is familiar. She was from Long Island, which is why I was so tuned into it. And she was actually wearing in some of her pictures, some people notice I wear gear with Long Island on it, but it's like a fish and like a fish bone. And that company's owned by a friend of mine. So when I saw that she disappeared, she had in her disappearance picture, she has a hat with that logo on it. And I was like, that's fucking weird. So she's like in our little well, it's a pretty big brand on Long Island. But
do you think that boardroom was like a Yoo-hoo, the Yoo-hoo boardroom when Kanye brought it up on Alex?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, they weren't feeling it.
Oh my God.
No. So that crime was interesting to me. For people that don't know, she was like a travel YouTuber, like a van life YouTuber, and her boyfriend like killed her basically, and then left her body somewhere, and they never ended up finding him alive, but he ended up killing himself in the Everglades, and it was like this month-long thing. And that was fascinating. But there's a more interesting story that and there's not so much out of it, so there's nothing to really see. But if you're not into it, there's so much to catch up on, which is the killing of the 4 students in Idaho. Do you guys know this one? 3 girls and a guy killed by this random PhD student. You told me
about this.
Who was like a criminologist and seemed to have tried to almost got away with this brutal crime of, I mean, he's accused of it. Who knows if he really did it, but it seems pretty conclusive that he probably did, considering they found the sheath to his knife in the bedroom underneath one of the bodies. So I think that's somewhat dead to rights, but who knows? Maybe he has an explanation. But I was really interested in that too, because there was like this weird cat and mouse game. I don't know if you guys recall, where it seemed like the Idaho police were totally bungling and stupid as fuck. I don't know. And for weeks, everyone's like, what are you guys doing? Like there's no, but they were basically tracking this dude kind of quietly the entire time, and then arrested him had him arrested in Pennsylvania, and just didn't want to give that away. So they like kind of looked like bungling old backwoods
Keystone
idiots.
cops.
Yeah, like for a minute. And then it actually ended up being this kind of brilliant coup de grace where they ended up like getting DNA from him in his house in Pennsylvania, the garbage can. And then like,
That's badass.
yeah, it's pretty cool. So those were the two crimes recently that I've kind of been tuned into. But I will say this about true crime, Chris, is if there's one thing that it's reinforced in me, and I'm not a violent person by nature. I don't really want to hurt anyone or commit any crimes anyway, but I wouldn't, because there's just no way you're going to get away with it. And that's what I'm so surprised that people, I do believe, we said this before Dagan on the show, that there's a reality in my mind where crime's gone up a little bit over the last few years, but crime had been going down since the 80s and 90s, largely because I think it's hard to get away with it now. And we all know it. I mean, imagine getting away with a crime 100 years ago and then getting away with a crime today. It's almost trivial when you think, like, it's almost surprising anyone got caught.
It's like
for some of the things they like.
Yeah,
how did you get, like, you live in a town of 100 people or something. You go to someone's house at night and you kill them, and it's like 1805 or whatever. And it's like, okay,
yeah. You just go to the next town.
How the fuck did you get caught?
You just go to the next town and you're fine.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
like that's like that. That's like that famous one of my favorite John Mulaney bits, where it's like, what was forensic science even like? And it's like, we found a pool of the murderer's blood by the entryway. It's like, oh, gross. I love that bit. It's one of my favorite bits.
He has a bit. It might be the same bit, isn't it? He has the bit too where he talks about the guys in the suits with the machine guns. Spraying their names into the wall. Yeah. Like we're the back.
And if anyone tells you who did it, tell them it's Jimmy Suggins and the Suggins gang.
Yeah, exactly. Like they would give you their name. They would be dressed in like 3-piece suits, and they would still get away with it. You know? Like,
yeah. I love John Mulaney, but
he's great.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. The thing that I always think about it though when I see these things, like, this is how it's just some guy in a suit. It's like, this is how he got away with it. This is where he fucked up or whatever. And it's like,
it's always something.
Do you want to be giving this info? Like, there's something about it that feels like, I mean, you guys are definitely probably, for sure. You guys are probably too old to have gone through this in school, but like, we did school shooting drills. Like, we did that.
Yeah.
And
that's scary.
And the thing that always fucking confused me was just like, dude,
it's a tutorial.
Yeah, like the person's here, likely. It's not some fucking guy. It's not some
so scary.
It's not like an accountant who's like walking down the street. It's like,
you're training the person.
I think I might do it today. Yeah, why not? No, it's always like a student or something, and so they're privy to all this stuff. Like, so it's something about, like, I get it in some way. I get it in some way. It does. It telegraphed the idea that, like, look, you're not going to get away with it, and that is a valuable. That is probably a valuable thing to exude, I suppose, or to put out into the universe. But at the same time, like, part of me feels like this would be valuable. Like, if I was a criminal, I'd be watching this shit all the time. Norm Macdonald has a famous bit about that too. It's like they always find him in a shallow grave. I think if I were to kill a woman, I'd put her in a really deep grave.
Yeah.
And it's because really honestly, like, that would probably solve a lot. Like, if they just didn't get so lazy with the hole.
Yeah, nobody.
A lot of
wants
these
to
people
dig.
would probably get away with it. But I don't know, man. Digging is hard.
It's just
digging
so
is harder
funny,
than killing a person.
It's just so funny with the dude in Idaho. Like, he shut his cell phone off. And that's during the time that it all happened. It's like, dude, you should have just left your cell phone at your house. Like, like, there's so many different ways to fuck it up. You know, if you were even just an earnest criminal, that's why I think it keeps a lot of people on the straight and narrow, even if they're crazy. Yeah. Because there's just no way you're going to get away with it. Like, I just couldn't imagine. And then you would always be worrying about it.
Always. Oh my God. Can you imagine?
It wouldn't be worth it
at all. Every noise, every siren, like, for the rest, and you probably get used to it more and more. But no, I couldn't. I mean, I couldn't imagine. That's why I don't lie. I don't try to, just because I don't want to live with it. You know,
dude,
it's like,
I get nervous here, like, when a cop is behind me and I didn't do anything wrong. Like I can't even imagine. Like if I had like, I don't know, if I had like exploded a person in a wheelchair or something in like Arizona, and then I had to like flee for years, and then like every siren bothered me. Like every siren already bothers me because I'm just wondering. It's like that's why this pisses me off when I get like pulled over. It's like a murderer probably just drove right past us.
Yeah.
I'm like, why? I was going 5 over. I'm sorry. Jesus.
So I dig my true crime, but it is a cyclical thing. The two things I wanted to say though, you brought up school shootings. I'm glad you did, because what's sad, Chris, is that Columbine happened when I was in 9th grade and we never had a school shooting drill because everyone thought that was going to be a kind of a one-off problem, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until after I had left that shit really went haywire with that. And then, one cool thing that I've realized, and this is where I thought you might have been going, Chris, earlier, and maybe you still will, is there are a subgroup of mostly women, but some men that literally solve this shit. Like, like that, like literally are like a house mom or something, like a housewife, or like just do something on the side there. She's an accountant or whatever. And then she had happened to have solved this crime. Because
I actually just straight up didn't even know that.
Yeah, so there's subreddits and forums and stuff dedicated to just specific crimes or criminality generally, and people kind of crowdsource the information and like literally figure some of this actually do figure
cases
some of this shit out, like, especially cold cases. Yeah, and I'm trying to think. I can't remember the guy's name. He's a famous comedian, and his wife, who has passed away now, was one of those women who like randomly just became obsessed. It was with the Golden Gate. I think it's actually the Golden State Killer. That like a really, that was apparently. I'm trying to.
I heard about that.
Oswald. I was going to say
Patton Oswalt.
I was going to say Norman Oswald. Patton Oswald.
His wife
who's passed.
Deceased.
Yeah,
wife.
like she was an obsessive, novice crime writer who solved, I think, the Golden State Killer crime, like straight up.
Holy shit.
And
that's
wrote,
crazy.
Like wrote an entire book on it, because it's just like some people, and there's a documentary about it, I think, and it's like she was obsessed with it, where like many layers deeper than most people go on Ewu or whatever, where she was in on the documents and interviewing people and doing all this and then literally figured it out. And that's kind of crazy. So like for every 999 people, or maybe 9,999 people that are messing around and just enjoy it, there's like that one person that's literally going to solve one of these crimes, which is kind of cool. Yeah. So you can go out there and find the forums and the subreddits if people are interested in that and how serious people get about it. But that's a little subgenre that's kind of cool within the true crime community that I like, is that they actually get results.
It's important to say, because I was saying before, it has a lore, like it's intriguing from the mouse's perspective, right? Like, how am I going to get away? How would I get away with it? What would I do? But it's really kind of the same thing. It has that magnetism from the cat's perspective too. Like people are trying to would be detectives. That's what I'm like. This genre is so big, dating back even pre-social media. I know how large it is now, but like with things like you were saying, Colin, in TV in the 80s and 90s with cops and stuff, and all the other detective shows, like that must be. You would think becoming a detective would be a very sought after career, right? Now, of course, you have to go up through the ranks and start as a beat cop and take the traditional trajectory and all that kind of thing. But you would think that would be one of the most popular professions due to the size of this genre, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the case. I wonder if there are a lot of people. I don't know anything about law enforcement numbers and recruiting and all that kind of thing, but that's interesting.
But I don't think I think it's just a lot. What's preclusive is probably just having to be a beat cop and
having to get to that.
Like you don't just become a detective
level.
Yeah. You have to be promoted to detective, I think, unless it's like the military, where if you have like a certain background or whatever, you just become an officer. I don't know if that's.
No, I think that's my best friend's dad was a New York City detective, and then eventually, before he retired, became an inspector. And yeah, he was definitely a cop. He was wearing his blues and everything out on the street, walking a beat and Corona and Queens,
spinning his nightstick.
Spinning his nightstick on the take.
What's going on, Jack?
Oh man!
Taps the window, of the car.
This makes me so mad. This makes me so fucking angry. I've never had like a pleasant experience. It's always been so just like, okay, here's my registration, here's my license. needlessly antagonistic.
How many times? And what coast, Chris? Are you talking Cali or talking New York?
I haven't really driven out here much at all.
Okay.
Because I'm just in a walkable area. But I think in New York, I got pulled over like probably, oh my God, like easily 7 times.
And they've all been unpleasant.
Every single one of them.
That
sucks. Like for no reason.
How are you
like,
getting pulled over so much? Is that an unusual amount to get
What are
pulled
you
over?
doing
I don't
with
drive, so I don't.
I mean, the thing is, it's like, I like to go fast. All right. I don't speed. I don't like go 90 or anything. But like, if it's like 65, I'm going 75.
I feel like
I think that's fucking totally fine. And like sometimes it feels like singled out because I was like the last. You know how like you're supposed to go with the flow of traffic or whatever, and but you're like the last guy go in the flow of traffic, and then they're like, well, we'll stop you because everybody else is gonna get away. It's like, dude, what?
You're the weak antelope.
Yeah, they pick you off. Yeah,
that's so that makes me so upset. I don't know, man. Like when I see these true crime things and I see all of these fucking psychopaths going around doing all of this crazy shit in broad daylight sometimes, and then like they get me because I'm going a completely reasonable speed. That is just not the speed that they suggest, because that's what that sign is. It's not the speed limit, because you can go over 5 with like a grace period. And also, like, you know what I mean? Like, you can go over 5 and it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, they don't typically stop you. So it's like, it's not the limit, is it? Yeah. It's not the limit.
That's the unwritten rule.
Yeah, it's the unwritten. Yeah. I don't know, man.
You're getting unlucky. I mean, that sucks to hear.
I am unlucky. I'm
my
very
interactions unlucky. I haven't been pulled over that many times. My interactions with cops, driving, skateboarding, whatever other run-ins have probably been like 50-50, but it always kind of sucks to hear that, like that people just, because it gives cops I grew up loving a cop, and of course I was biased. I wasn't under his jurisdiction. I wasn't in his beat when he was walking in the neighborhood. I was in his home when he was off. So it's a different perspective, but it's always kind of heartbreaking to hear that, because
I mean, I have a cop in my family too. Like, I have an uncle who's a cop. Like, I get it, but like at the same time, it's like, dude, I'm never happy to see one. It's never like it's never a good thing that there's a cop there. It's always like, hey, here's some bad news. Or is this your dog? Or like, hey, oh, hey, I'm on the road now. Now everyone's gonna drive like a fucking grandma because no one wants to get pulled over. So like they're an impedance on everybody else around them when they're on the road, because nobody wants to drive like they would normally drive because they're afraid of getting pulled over. So like it's just universally like I'm not like, oh, get rid of cops or anything. You know, I understand that there's like a necessity here, but at the same time, is it really super necessary for you to pull over people who are like, there are people speeding on these highways at like 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, you never see those people getting pulled over.
No, because they're too fucking fast. And then they're like, well, if they chase them, then there's 2 people speeding, and then that's double dangerous. So like they're just going to go for the guy going 10 miles over?
Yeah, no high-speed chases.
I don't know. It makes me feel like I'm not breaking the law enough to be respected by the cop. You know, it makes me feel like if I was a real criminal, you'd respect me enough by not pulling me over.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's complicated.
The weak antelope reference, very good.
Yeah. Well, it's complicated. I thought about this. I've been driving for a long time. It's luck, but it's also, Chris, I always say you got to run a pigeon, especially if you're on a highway. Maybe there's a lot of traffic. Maybe traffic is a little lighter, but you got to have that guy that's always be the second fastest. That's the theory. Don't be the fastest.
No, I'll drive completely recklessly just so I can get ahead. Just so I'm not that last person. I'll ram people off the road if I can get into the middle of that crowd. You know, I heard a long time ago, because I have a red Corolla, you know, and so I heard a long time ago that like, hey man, cops stop red cars more often.
That's true, I think, because
there's a perception that they're going fast because they look so cool. That's not what they said, but they did say like there's an idea that's like, oh, they're for whatever reason they get pulled over more.
They pop.
And yeah, because they pop, I guess. But it's like, if I know that, then shouldn't the cop know that as well? Like, shouldn't the cop be aware of that internal bias and be like,
yeah, that's a great point.
Like, I almost feel like they should be double checking red cars and be like, is that really like a...
I'm not going to get fooled by that red car. Nice try, but
I don't know, man.
Go for the white car.
This whole topic was chosen as a way for me to vent about being pulled over by cops, man.
That is in fact true crime.
Yeah, that's the true crime.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Jerry.
Chris, I saw a guy. I was driving with a friend.
Yeah.
By the way, Curb's coming back. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I saw a guy. I was pulled over with a friend. He wasn't a friend. He was like a friend of a friend once who got a speeding ticket so expensive that the guy started crying.
Dude,
it was unbelievable.
You got to keep it together.
It was unbelievable.
Can I ask?
He just broke down.
Can I ask you something about speeding tickets?
Yeah, sure.
Do you feel that the way I do that? So let me back it up a little bit. We can end it after this. But like, I've always had this. Justin Bieber got like arrested many years ago for like drag, or not arrested, but like he got a ticket for speeding many years ago on like some freeway in Los Angeles. But it's like it's a traffic ticket. It's like a speeding ticket.
Sure.
So it's like that materially doesn't affect him at all. You know, like he's a fucking millionaire. You know what I mean?
It's Biebs.
It's
right.
Biebs. It's the Biebster. I've always felt like, dude, if you're like, or Jeff Bezos would do this too, like, or like one of those people, like where they would park their cars like along, and they would get like a bunch of traffic tickets, but it wouldn't matter to them because it's so infinitesimally small compared to like.
Right.
I've always been of the mind is like if you're like rich like that, like your speeding ticket should be like $50,000
relative to your wealth.
It should be commensurate
100%.
with what you have.
Like 100%. Because like that's the whole point of that, right? Is that it impacts us in the same way.
Right.
Or like statistically the same way. And like it doesn't make sense for you to like charge Jeff Bezos $100 for like breaking a law.
Right. Yeah. Like you would almost think the progressive tax structure would make the most sense there.
Right.
In a punitive way.
You know? Sure.
In a punitive way, exactly. It always bothered the hell out of me. It's like, dude, if you're Jeff Bezos, you should get like a $10 million traffic ticket if you're doing that shit.
That's an interesting point.
You're speeding.
I don't hate that point. Like, I don't hate that. Like, because it really does, like, it's onerous on people, like on low income people, and irrelevant to high income people, but everyone kind of pays the same amount. And we talk about that with income, but why wouldn't we talk about that with fees and fines?
Yeah. I don't know. It makes sense to me, but like, it just reminded me of that.
I bet if you did the research too, they would draw more income and revenue that way. Right?
They would.
The more expensive cars are the faster cars. People, the rich people are busy, right? Like they try to get from point A to point B super fast. To do the math.
Maybe that's the argument. Is that like, oh, well, then they'll just like go after the nice cars. You know what I mean? Because like they know that they can extract a lot of value out of it.
So now it's profiling.
Yeah, so now it's profiling. But I don't know. I still feel like, I don't know. Like the whole point is that it's a penalizing system to keep us all on an equal playing field, right? So like if, I don't know, man, $100 $100 is barely anything to me, let alone fucking Jeff fucking Bezos. I'm gonna be annoyed that I lost $100, but like it's not gonna be like I don't know, some Amazon worker where like, oh, I can't eat. I gotta pay New York $150 because I went 5 miles over the fucking speed. I'm sorry. We're getting.
Chris, you got to use I don't know if you already do use it, but that's how my family sold me on the Waze app. Was that it just alerts you when cops are, and it's that and red light cameras, which they reintroduced into Philadelphia and never told anybody.
Nice.
And so it'll tell you, red light cameras will tell you when cops are in. This way you could kind of, you could. I'm not advocating speeding. I'm just saying there's nothing worse than being caught in a speed trap. There's nothing worse than feeling like you lost in life by getting caught speeding.
I would just argue that there's a difference between briskness and speeding.
Okay.
Like there are people speeding. You're going 100 miles an hour on like a 65. Hey,
in a school zone.
Yeah, in like a school in a school zone. Hey, guess what? You're speeding. You're
going to get assassinated if you do that first.
No, yeah, 100%. Yeah,
it will kill you.
Oh my God, man. I feel like the grace limit should be up from 5 to 10 to 15. Like I just feel like it's kind of ridiculous. Like it's not really that much faster. School zones, I get it, but like I'm on a highway.
Then why not just make the speed limit 85?
But then down there you have that thing where they monitor it by aircraft. Is that a lie?
That's fucking insane. It's so
I don't know.
What are you doing to try to catch your people by flying aircraft and trying to catch them speeding in the get a life.
Wait, what is it?
Yeah,
What is that?
south of the
This is
Mason-Dixon
happening?
line.
Yeah. There were signs
They
on
advertise that it's real.
Yeah.
I don't know
on
that
Long
it
Island.
is.
It says that for sure. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like I think there are some jurisdictions that got rid of red light cameras because people are like, this is insane. Like, this is fucked up. Like, if you're not there, why are we allowing this to be? It's like people that have Alexa in their house. I'm like, I think you're crazy personally.
It's some Big Brother shit.
Yeah.
I have an Alexa in my house.
Well, they're listening to you. The FBI agents listening to you every day.
Oh, good. I really like to me.
You have your own.
You know what? You know what got me to think. You know what got me to feel like that was okay. Do you remember that famous Curb Your Enthusiasm story where that guy was like accused of like a murder? This is actually a great. I can't believe that this is. I didn't bring this up. This is like a perfect. This is a perfect point to bring up.
Yeah, and he was in the episode of the show.
He got off because there was proof that he was in the background of a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode at the time of the murder.
It was at a Dodgers game specifically, Dave.
Oh shit! Yep. I didn't know about this.
So the way that I feel about it is like, look, if there's audio recordings of me just fucking, if there's audio recording of me jerking off at 3 a.m., look, man, I'm totally fine. Because the last thing I want is like, oh, hey, he killed me, he killed me, or whatever. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. Check my Alexa.
Yeah.
Chris, Alexa, you know what's so funny
Chris was
about
beaten
that?
off at 3 a.m. last night. He wasn't murdering no one.
Yeah, it's like document me being
just
innocent.
Murdering my meat,
great?
maybe.
That was the only thing you were beaten for sure.
I never thought about murdering anybody. But I save all my receipts for that very reason. It's so weird. I have shoeboxes full of receipts. Like I'm going to need an alibi for something.
Yeah, almost to the point where it blows past its usefulness. You know, what's that theory of like if everybody got their personal information stolen and put somewhere, like it would be almost the same as if no one had anything stolen. You know, because like the odds of you being able to single anybody out from that is like insanely impossible.
Right. That was that famous AOL hack from 20 years ago or whatever, where people's search results were leaked, but only by ID number. But you could reverse engineer the leak by vanity searching and then finding linking the ID number up or whatever. And that's how people had to do it. So it was anonymous, except for people searching for themselves and outing themselves. You know,
right? So, yeah. It's funny.
Yeah, it is. I kind of accept that. We've said this before, Chris. We're getting ads on our phones for things that we're talking about. And that seems to be like totally, everyone's just like totally, whoa.
Everybody knows.
Oh, that's cool. Well, it's weird. I was talking about a wedding dress and now I got a wedding dress ad.
Do you know
that's interesting.
Well, do you know what that is actually? It's actually worse than what you think it is. I actually did like a lot of research into this because I thought like, oh, they must be listening to you. But apparently like the bandwidth of that is impossible. Like to justify the amount of bandwidth that they would have to, and also just like the idea of like sitting through and like piecing together conversations. What it is actually that you are that predictable to their algorithm.
Huh.
And so what it does is like it builds like a network of the people you know and the people that you contact most often, and it keeps track of their Google searches and their conversations. So basically, like if you're talking about wedding dresses, right, with a friend of yours that you talk to a lot, and then that person goes and Googles wedding dresses, they see that you and that person have enough of a back and forth communication that you're probably thinking about the same thing too. So they'll use their data to advertise to you and vice versa. It's actually fucked. It's actually way worse.
Completely. You should be able to opt out of this in a real way.
Yeah. I don't like that. Unfortunately, no. Yeah, it's scary.
Well, on that note, are we satisfied? Be a shorter episode, but that's just the way it goes. I haven't heard from Cog. I don't know. Well, maybe someone texted me. I don't know. Oh,
I hope he's all right.
It's my accountant. Take a shot. It's my accountant.
Oh, sure. All right.
So
hope he's all right.
Yeah, I'll figure that out after we're done. I hope he is okay too. Maybe he's just caught up in work or whatever. We'll hope for the best. I don't know. I worry about everyone like I'm a mother hen or something.
Okay.
I don't know. It's like, dude, live your life. You're probably fine. You know. Let's go around the horn and say goodbye to everyone. Chris, thanks for joining us today on this abbreviated episode. We appreciate your time.
No problem. I love being on Constellation.
Cool.
It's fun topics. I'm really excited for I'm really excited for the next one that I'm going to be on. I'm holding on to this topic with my dear life, and I think you guys will get a kick out of it. Yeah, everybody listening.
I think so too. All right, thank you for that. And Dag, goodbye to you. Thanks for your time. Have a good weekend.
Oh, it was super fun. Thank you guys very much. Who would be the good fourth chair for Chris's topic without giving away too much?
I have to think about that. I don't know. Really, almost anyone probably. But
it's just fun.
Yeah,
super fun. All right, weekend's here. We're going on a sledding thing for Boy Scouts tomorrow. There's no snow.
Oh, interesting.
So this should be fun.
Yeah,
it's just mud.
So you're just going to be on wet grass.
Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast.
All right. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. We appreciate you here on Constellation. All of our shows, support us, early ad-free access, etc. Patreon.com/laststandmedia, laststandmedia.store for merch, t-shirts, stickers, sweatshirts, hats, etc. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.